Irish Breakdown Nation, welcome back to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by FanDuel. It is Tuesday. It is game week. Notre Dame has no more buys until whatever happens in the postseason comes along, so we got 5 straight weekends of Notre Dame football coming your way. I'm excited to dive into this one. This Saturday, they take on Boston College in Chestnut Hill for the first time since 2020. This is their first meeting since 2022. A lot of exciting things going on with this matchup. Boston College is 1-7. They're reeling. Notre Dame is riding a 5-game win streak, Brian. So today we are talking about the matchup, and we're splitting this off into 2 different segments. On part 1 of today's show, we're talking Notre Dame's offense versus the Boston College defense. And then in part 2, we're talking Notre Dame's defense versus the Boston College offense. And then today, folks, we are going to have a daily mailbag at the end of the show. So make sure you get your questions in, comments, super chats, all that fun stuff. Put a little MB for mailbag or a little mailbox emoji that lets us know to set your question aside, because we want to make sure that we have enough for a full mailbag segment at the end. I'm sure you guys will rise to the challenge. But Brian, today, Notre Dame, Boston College. Let's dive into these matchups, man. How you doing?
I'm great, man. I always look forward to the BC game, even when they're not good. I always look forward to this game because there's just so many memories of this game, some good, some bad. But even the bad ones are what kind of fuel you to look forward to this game because you want to just pound them. So, yep, man, I can't wait. I'm excited about it. And it's going to be a big week, real big week. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too, man. I get to go out to Boston for the first time ever. I've never been to Boston, so that's going to be a lot of fun. Lauren's also never been to Boston, so shout out to Irish Breakdown and this opportunity for letting us travel out there. It's going to be a lot of fun. Happy to be out there in person. Never been to Alumni Stadium, so that's one that I can cross off the bucket list.
It's a cool little stadium, Trev. It is. It's okay. It's a stadium where it's not your typical big Notre Dame, Michigan type of stadium. It's a smaller stadium, a little bit smaller group, but it's real quaint. Like the press box has treated us well when we have gone up there in the past. So it's a cool place to watch a ball game. It is. I've always enjoyed my couple trips up there for the stadium. So yep, you're gonna enjoy yourself. You're gonna enjoy yourself. So
right on.
But this matchup is good, Trev, and this is the chance that Notre Dame gets to kind of start making their statement for the playoff. Everybody's kind of positioned themselves for this final run. Teams have had some wins, teams have had some losses. You're bracing for this final run, and this is your chance to really make the statement. So it's kind of like where you get ranked now is sort of the starting line. Okay, here's where we are. Now who's gonna win the sprints to the finish line, and this is your first chance to do it. This is your first. It's your last statement really before the playoff committee comes out, which to me is part of that race. They have their opinions on where teams are, and then this weekend's going to kind of show people like, all right, well, Notre Dame's back at it. They were a little out of sight, out of mind last weekend, and now they're back at it. And holy moly, did you see what they did to Boston College? Or, did you see what they did to Boston College? I'm not sure about it. So you're going to make a statement one way or the other in this game, Trev. The only question is, what statement will you make? And how they're able to thrive in this matchup and the different aspects within the matchup, which we're going to talk about today, is going to go a long way towards telling us how good this Notre Dame football team is going to be down the stretch. Because you're not defined by how you play in this game, but it's a big statement, and it does start to kind of say, okay, if you play well, cool, they're rolling. If you don't play well, it's sort of okay, well, we've seen this issues on defense happen. We've seen these offensive issues happen. Maybe this is just who they are. And so that's why I think a strong performance is needed. And, look, the score could be 56-0, and we come away like, I don't know, man, that, they just were way better than BC. It could be a more competitive game. I say competitive. It could be a 40-21 game, and you come away feeling pretty good about it for different reasons. So how the game is played matters. But I have to think if Notre Dame plays their game, this is not going to be an overly competitive football game, despite some things about BC that you and I both like. There are some things about BC that we like. And I mean, Trev, you and I were joking. If this was a 7-on-7 game, the spread would be a lot lower because the BC offense has some legit athletes at receiver and running back and tight end. But this is a game that, if Notre Dame is going to be Marcus Freeman talked about it. He was asked about his identity the other day, randomly for some reason. And he said, look, we're always going to be a line-driven program. Like, I don't know what you thought he was going to say other than that, but, whatevs. But we're a line-driven program. Well, if you are, these are the kind of games where you should really dominate, because this is where you should hold that kind of advantage. And we'll talk further about that as we get into the matchups. But when you just look at this matchup, big picture, Trev, it's you're the more athletic team, you're the more powerful team. And, this is a game where if you are who we think you are, you should perform well. But there are also some things that BC does well that if you don't perform well, you're going to get shown a little bit there. It's going to get exposed a little bit there. And, man, I'm excited about it. Very excited about it.
You and I see it the exact same. If Notre Dame plays their style of football, I don't see this one being overly close, if close at all. But to your point, and I love what you brought up earlier about the playoff committee, and this is the last opportunity that Notre Dame has to make an impression before the initial playoff rankings come out. And at the end of the day, we want to think that, the people voting on this don't have any biases and, they're going to look at everything equivalently, but these are people who are on these committees. And recency bias is a factor. So if the last two games they remember watching in Notre Dame is in a driving rain against a rival, winning by 10 points and arguably could have won by more, with an electric performance from your running backs and a dominant win where you win in all three phases of the game against Boston College, that's going to carry a long way. And it's definitely going to carry a heavier weight than just the logo on the, I guess, lack thereof of the logo on the helmet or the name on the jersey. And so this one's going to be huge. And how it's going to have to go, the offense is going to have to be a driver of some of that success, Brian, like we've talked about. So let's talk about this matchup between Notre Dame's offense and Boston College's defense. And, when you look at this Boston College defense, Brian, this has just been the side of the ball that has really kept them down this year, because we are high on some pieces of the talent that Boston College has, but reality sets in. They allowed 38 points to Louisville, 38 points to UConn, 41 points to Clemson, and then 48 points to Pitt on the road. We're talking about a defense that has allowed opposing teams to score over 38 points in each of their last 4 games. And I think that's reflective in some of the numbers that you have pulled up here. This has been a rough outing for the Boston College defense this season.
When BC was giving Notre Dame some problems back in the 2000s, one of the issues was they just dominated Notre Dame's offense. They had physical football players, and we were talking the other day about the 08 game with BJ Raji and Ron Brace, and you think back to even the years when Notre Dame had some success, but the Harold Landrys, the Zach Allens, trying to remember. I mean, Luke Kuechly at linebacker, around the 2010 to 11 era. And they always seem to be at least physical in the trenches and good in the trenches. They just struggled with the athletes, and they always had really good offensive lines. And, you watch the side of the ball now and you're just like, boy, they're just not good in the trenches. They're just not good in the box. And that's really presented some problems, because they not only don't have the athletes in the secondary that some other teams do, they're not able to at least neutralize that to some degree with physicality. And they try hard, but they're just not real big, strong guys. I mean, I'm watching Cedarius McConnell, number 88 for them. I'm like, this kid really plays with a great motor. He tries hard. He gets after it, but you just see him get consumed too often because he's 6'3", 279-pound defensive tackle. And he doesn't have the overall just strength and power and quickness that, let's say, a Donovan Heidnish has, or something along those lines. And so those are things that you look at, Trev, and you say, okay, if they don't have those neutralizers that can help them overcome, the lack of athleticism that they almost always have on defense. And that's what's really hurt them. Their ends are decent sized. One's 240. Quintavious Hutchins is a good player. Edwin Kolanga's 252. Favor Bate is 249. Ayla Boykin is 241. They're not real big there. They've got a couple 300-pounders at the nose. They're okay players. And their 279-pound starting defensive tackle is literally the biggest D tackle at that position in their 3 deep. The other 2 guys that play and are listed there are even smaller. And so it's a problem, Trev. I mean, it's just one of those things where this is a team that just really struggles to disrupt. It's a team that struggles to, get a lot of pressure on the quarterback. It's a team that really struggles to be disruptive, and these numbers show it. I mean, they're 122nd in tackles for loss allowed. They're 98th in sacks, which is, not good, obviously. But when you look at the number, they had 7 in the first 2 games. They're at 13. They've played 8 games. They had 7 in the first 2 games. They've only had 6 since then in 6 games. So it's one of those things where the lack of disruption in the run game and pass game, because their front just struggles to make a ton of plays, it leads them lacking. And their linebackers play hard, but they're not the athletes they've had there in the past. I mean, when Notre Dame was playing them, back in the 2000s, they would always have, okay, what linebacker that was a 2 or 3 star recruit that's now a stud in college are we going to have to face this time? It's like, and they're just not producing those kind of players right now. And that's certainly if Bill O'Brien's going to get this thing turned around, he's going to have to find some answers on defense. And your coordinator can only take you so far. You're going to have to upgrade the talent, because right now they don't have that. That doesn't mean they can't present some problems, because when you watch their film, Trev, their D coordinator knows he doesn't have players. He knows it. And that's why they do some of the things they do from a coverage standpoint. They will mix up coverages, roll coverages. That's the only thing that concerns me about this game is that CJ Carr thinks he sees single high, drops back, is going to throw a route that he thinks is going to get a single high, and they're rolling to cover 2, and they'll do that a lot. And those kind of mistakes. But he knows they lack players, which is why he schemes the way that he does, which helps them make some plays, but also hurts them because it can leave them exposed in certain situations.
Yeah, agreed. And I also think that the talent level on this defense is also reflective in some of the recruiting rankings that they have. They don't have a single player on defense, excuse me, that rotates in or is in their starting lineup that even sniffed being a top 400 recruit in terms of rankings. Matter of fact, most of them ranked outside of the top 1,000. And the back end of their defense, from their second linebacker all throughout their secondary, they all rank in the thousands. To your point, I think the defense, the defensive coordinator understands what he has. But I'm with you. That is the one schematic thing that does give me some pause for this game. And it also talks about a little bit about what we still need to see from this Notre Dame offense is when you have this much of a significant athletic advantage, I've seen teams before get lazy with how they approach opponents like this. And they're not as clean schematically. They're not as clean from a play calling standpoint, but because they have such a dramatic athletic advantage, it doesn't look like how it should. To your point about Notre Dame could win 56-0, but it's like, I could see it being a little bit something like that. But I'm with you. This defense so far has struggled this season. And unfortunately, there's not a phase where there's a strength. We've talked a lot this season about Notre Dame's offense has gone up a lot against a lot of defense that, the defense is the weak point of their team from a statistical and a performance perspective, but it's always one or the other. Like we would like with USC, they were relatively decent rush defense, but their pass defense wasn't great. And then obviously Notre Dame put the rush defense questions for USC to rest a little bit. This Boston College defense struggles in both phases, and it's a tough look.
Yeah, I mean, Trev, I'm looking at you go through the Pro Football Focus numbers and you look at different things, and they had 14 pressures against Fordham, and then the next week against Michigan State they had 17, and like that's okay, but they were at least getting to the quarterback. They 3 sacks one game, 4 sacks the other game. But since then, Trev, it's been a problem. They only had 10 pressures against Stanford, only 10 against Stanford. Like Stanford does not have a great pass rush. Only 1 sack, 4 hits on the quarterback. You look at the Cal game, they only had 11 pressures on the quarterback, no sacks in that game, according to PFF. You look at the Pitt game, they had 19 pressures, decent performance, 2 sacks in that game. That's the best they did all season, is 19 pressures in the game. Clemson game, they only had 13 pressures, 1 sack, only 2 hits on the quarterback. We know that Clemson's had its fair share of offensive line issues this year. They only had 12 pressures and 2 total sacks plus hits on the quarterback against UConn this season. And then obviously last week against Louisville, only had 9 pressures against Louisville last week, 1 total sack or hit on the quarterback. It just it hasn't been a great performance from them. And 2 of their pressures last week were from defensive backs because their D coordinator knows if we want to get after the quarterback, we're going to have to do some exotic stuff, which is great, but it's also why Louisville had a ton of big plays in that game. I mean, Louisville was not very good again that game. Like they were missed some throws, and Miller Moss had some head scratching decisions, but they still had success because they had like a 73-yard touchdown run early. They had a 60-yard touchdown. I mean, they were ripping off the big plays because if you catch them right, there's just they don't have an answer. But he has to do it. I mean, in his defense, he has to do it, or he's just going to sit back and just get torn apart.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And they're also not that disciplined of a defense, unfortunately. Like not from a play calling standpoint, but the players that they put on the field. I mean, they have 87 missed tackles so far this season through 8 games, and only 7 of them came against Fordham. So they have 80 missed tackles in 7 games.
And honestly, Trev, I don't know that I don't know that I'd say that's as much about a lack of ability as it is about lack of discipline.
Sure.
Like you know what I mean? Fair. Like even at times they take bad angles of the football. You know, they don't wrap up all the time, to your point. But then also there's just times they arrive at the ball and you're just like, this guy has no chance to bring that guy down in space. And Louisville certainly showed that last weekend. Certainly.
Oh yeah. I mean, injuries have also played a little bit of a factor with their defense. So they've had some linebackers that are kind of banged up, and really in the secondary, their defensive coordinator is just trying to find some answers. They've started multiple different players in their secondary. They moved Carter Davis, who was a safety to start the year, to boundary corner to try to find some answers there just because of his size. You know, 6'1", 205. And so they were just trying to find some sort of options there. So I don't envy the job of Boston College's defensive coordinator. That is for sure.
No. Well, and to your point, Trev, also about the missed tackles part, last week the Louisville offense forced 11 missed tackles in the run game alone. Isaac Brown forced 5 missed tackles, and Kewan Brown forced 6. That's 11 tackles on only 24 carries. So again, it's a bit of an issue for BC. It's something that they struggle with. And I think, like you said, part of it's discipline. Part of it's also just they don't have great athletes, and when those great athletes get in space, they're gonna have some problems. So, it's unfortunate to see because BC is a program that's always been known for certain things, but they're definitely not making those kind of plays now. So it reflects in the numbers. I mean, 97th in the country in 30+ yard gains. You're 110th in yards per play, just getting gashed. You're 105th in yards allowed per carry. You're 98th in the country in yards allowed per pass attempt. You're 77th on third down. And a lot of that just has to do with you just don't have guys who can make stops. And that's really a lot of what it boils down to. And so when you look at this matchup with the BC defense, like there's really no way to spin this into like personnel wise, these are the problems they give. Here's where I think you could say the concern would be for Notre Dame, right? Because you're just not going to roll the ball out there and blow them out. When you look at this game, what allowed them to stay in the game last week against Louisville was they were able to force 3 turnovers. What ultimately did them in is they also turned it over 3 times. But it comes down to, I do believe, watching them play, that their defensive coordinator knows that they lack the talent. Right? You watch Tim Lewis. Tim Lewis has been around for a while. He's been a longtime coach. He's a guy that he understands, right? Like he understands, like, hey, this is a longtime NFL coach, but he understands, hey, we don't have the horses. And so part of what makes them a big play allowed defense is they have to take chances to make stops, and that leaves them very vulnerable. And that's where Notre Dame's going. So, but the point is, if Notre Dame struggles with 2 new offensive linemen basically in the offensive line and a redshirt freshman quarterback with recognizing where's the pressure coming from, I promise you they're going to bring safety fires. I won't be shocked if they bring some corner fires. Why not? Why not? What do you have to lose? maybe CJ Carr doesn't see that boundary. And if they're smart, I've never understood teams that bring corner fires from the quarterback's arm side. Never makes sense to me. Wait till you're in the boundary. For Notre Dame, wait till Notre Dame's on the left hash and bring a boundary corner fire. Shorter distance. It's for not the quarterback's not coming from his face, and make the pressure that way. But they're going to mix up their coverages. They're going to show certain things and roll to them, and that's the hope that they have, is that they can do some things to confuse the Notre Dame offensive line. They're going to run twists and stunts, and they actually, the one thing I'll give their D line is they're pretty good at timing in the stunt game. Like they're coached relatively well up front. They just, like I said, they don't have the horses up front to make some plays. They have some decent athletes up front. Hutchins is a solid player. The McConnell kid's a quality athlete. They're just small. But if you're not sound in your protection scheme and kind of have an idea of and prepared well for the fact that they're going to bring a lot of pressures to you, then some of those can get home and cause you some problems and maybe cause Notre Dame to sputter a little bit. They'll eventually figure it out. They'll eventually do what they need to do to win. But as we've talked about, you don't want an ugly pull away in the fourth quarter win. You want a game where it's over at halftime for a number of reasons. But if they're going to have struggles, it's going to be because of that right there, because that's one thing Coach Lewis does well is he knows there's a very big awareness defensively of who they are personnel-wise, and they coach to protect it as much as they can.
I agree. I agree with everything that you said, and I for one am expecting a good offensive output from Notre Dame because of the gap in skilled talent. Tim Lewis is going to do some things to try to confuse CJ Carr, but at the end of the day, like we always talk about, sometimes it just comes down to who you put out onto the field. Right now, FanDuel has Notre Dame's over under point total at 42.5. And it wouldn't surprise me if the over hit there. Their first half spread, Brian, to put this into perspective for you, is they're expecting Notre Dame to take a 3-score lead into halftime. The over under point total is at 16.5. So they see that very much the same as well.
For the first half, they have it that way in the first half. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting.
Yep. I thought so too, man.
I can see that.
Let's talk a little bit then, Brian, about some areas of concern. I mean, I know this whole conversation about the defense has kind of been lumped into one we've touched on a little bit, but if you're Boston College's defense, what are some areas of concern that Notre Dame's offense does present you outside of the obvious of just like the talent is such a big gap?
Yeah, I mean, it's the for BC, it's about the talent. It's just, the size and the talent. I think that's the big concern for BC, which then leads to what's my biggest concern for Notre Dame. It's that they know that there's a talent gap and they're going to do things to try to confuse you. There's really nowhere in the BC defense that I get overly concerned with the area of concern for Notre Dame being, okay, this guy's a really good player. Or this part of their defense is really good. I know they're not good over here, but this part's really good. There's really nothing like that when it comes to BC. It really boils down to they are going to disguise coverages. They're going to disguise pressures. Can you recognize those things pre and post snap from a coaching and a player standpoint? That's really a big key. And then when it comes to the Notre Dame receivers, can you guys be a little bit smarter and play with a little bit more urgency in this game to be able to find some of those open windows and open holes? You watch Louisville and you watch, I'm watching the Pitt game and I'm watching these teams that are throwing all over BC. Clemson had a lot of success throwing over BC, not Louisville. Sorry, they didn't throw the ball a ton. But, obviously UConn had a ton of success throwing the ball, and Clemson and Pitt. Their receivers doing a great job finding those openings, especially over the middle. And then when you get your one-on-ones outside, do you have the urgency to really use your speed to just beat them? Because that's like, I think it was a Pitt. I think the first long touchdown pass Pitt had, it was just a one-on-one to the field, and the guy just outran him. Just, threw it over the top on the outside, touchdown. But will the receivers play with enough urgency? That's kind of the thing that concerns me a little bit is they're going to throw some stuff at you. Can you recognize it, handle it, and pick it up? Because if you can do that from the BC standpoint, now it becomes my dudes versus your dudes, and that's not where BC wants to be. They want to make this a mental game, not a physical game. If it's a physical game, they're toast. If it's a mental game and they win the mental battle, that's where they have a shot to maybe create enough mistakes for Notre Dame to give them some short fields and, keep Notre Dame off the board. That's going to be the key.
Another one of my concerns for this one for Notre Dame specifically is going to be kind of the juice of the receivers, specifically Malachi Fields and Jordan Faison. We've spent all bye week talking about how much mileage and how much tread is getting put on those tires. And after a week off, I'm hoping that they're a little bit recharged. But because of Boston College's inability to consistently get after the quarterback, this might be a game where all receivers across the field will have to finish the routes that they run. CJ Carr will find Jordan Faison backside. He will find Will Pauling backside or Malachi Fields backside. And I mean, we've even seen him in games where he has less pressure, or where he gets pressured a little bit more than what I'm forecasting him to in this game. Find his third or fourth read and a dump off to Raritan or so. So that is another one of my concerns, just the overall freshness of this team. I think sometimes, and it obviously helps, but I think there are times where people, it's like, oh, bye week, they'll just be back to 100%. It's like, well, not 100%, just better than what they were the week before the bye. So that is another concern that I have as well. Brian, let's talk some matchups that matter. And what are some of those that you're paying attention to?
Well, I think the big one for me is the two new interior guys. You got Joe Otting's going to be matched up against Chris Marable and Quan Williams a lot. They're bigger guys. They're a lot like the USC guys. Now that there's some film of, what Joe looks like in the starting lineup, they're going to do some things there. Also with Sedarius McConnell, who I just mentioned is not a real athletic kid. Well, this is Sullivan Absher's first start. What are some things they may do with him to utilize his speed against Preston, who's a bigger, thicker kid? That not that Preston's not athletic, but he's not as like explosive and twitchy as Gerby is athletically. Do they do some things to try to get Sedarius McConnell to give him problems either with his slants and twists and then beating him or slants and then pressures to kind of get under his pads, but then also what are some things that they do in the twist game on that left side? Anthony Knapp's had some issues at times handling twists and stunts. Now you've got a brand new starter next to him. You've got a new starter center. Your center to left tackle is still very young and inexperienced in certain ways. What is BC going to do to try to take advantage of that? And can Notre Dame's guys handle it? So if Joe Otting and Sullivan Absher play a good game, this offensive line should roll. But so when you talk about matchups, it's those two guys right there against the BC interior players. I have a feeling Gerby Lambert's going to play a real good game. He's just continued to trend up, and he's going back home. He's a Boston area native, so I think he's going to be kind of fired up for this game.
Yeah,
it's how does Sullivan Absher play as well in his first start as Joe Otting played in his first start, and then can Joe build on what we saw from him against USC? I think that's first and foremost the biggest matchup that I'm concerned about, Trev.
Yeah, I echo that same sentiment. I mean, look, it's an unfortunate reality, but the reality is the interior of Notre Dame's offensive line is significantly less experienced than what they were going into October as they are going into November, with Ashton Craig and Billy Strouth both out. So the bright side is Sullivan Absher. It's not like Joe Otting where he's kind of coming off the bench a little cold. Not cold. He had a week to prepare to start, but Sullivan Absher rotated in against Miami. He took some right guard snaps against Purdue and has gotten in some other minutes as well at the end of games. But I'm with you. That is a concern. Sedarius McConnell, he leads the team right now in tackles for loss and sacks. And he only has 6 total pressures on the season. 3 of them have resulted in sacks, 2.5 really. But those are some of the Pro Football Focus numbers. And then he leads the team with 6.5 tackles for a loss. So that's definitely going to be an interesting matchup to watch for Sullivan Absher. I'm with you there. Another matchup I'm keeping my eye on, not necessarily a concern, just a monitor, is Carter Davis. That
I'd say one thing about McConnell, he does lead the D line in run stops as well with 12. So
gotcha.
like his overall, he's the most disruptive lineman they have in all phases of the game.
Yeah, disruptive and consistent that I've seen, especially after watching them on film too. So yeah, I'm sure it doesn't surprise me or you that the numbers back that up. That's for sure. The other matchup that I am keeping my eye on is Malachi Fields versus Carter Davis. Carter Davis is one of their bigger DBs. He's 6'1", he's 205. Like I said, he was a safety to start the season. They moved him into the boundary. And Malachi Fields is just a player, simply put, that Notre Dame has to get going on offense. They cannot reach their full ceiling with Malachi Fields going for 1 catch for 9 yards and 1 catch for 20 yards on 13 combined targets. So it's not that there is a lack of effort to get him the football, but this is a game that can kind of start to build up his confidence a little bit, because Carter Davis is a quality football player, but he's somebody that's kind of playing out of position a little bit. And it's just, that's not an indictment of Carter Davis. I think he's a quality athlete. I think he's just more of a safety than what he is a cornerback. So they have to look to do things to get Malachi Fields the ball in this one. And some of it will just be, my guy's better than your guy in the boundary, and we're going to give him some shots. Because I don't fall into the camp of people that think that CJ Carr's been in a slump. I don't think that, but I do think that he's had some mistimed throws to Fields. Like I said, you don't have 13 targets and then 2 receptions all because of, the person you're matched up against, or Fields is having an awful. So that operation as a whole, Fields one-on-one, CJ getting in the football timely, putting enough air under it on some of it's leading him on others. That's going to be a huge matchup that I'm going to be watching as well.
And some of it's the Notre Dame staff doing more with him. Like, okay, we get it, guys. He's going to run stops and hitches. Like, people have kind of figured that out now. Maybe there's some other things we can do with him to try to get him the football, but I'm with you. I'm with you on that one. So I think that's an interesting matchup. It is. And look, Carter Davis is a kid that you and I talked about before the season, Trevor, is part of we really liked this BC safety duo with KP Price as run defenders. But, he's now in a position, like you said, he's not as, not as good, but he's going to be physical, and they're going to help him. That's the thing, is they're going to play a lot of cover 2 to the boundary, and you've got to be able to find some ways. Look, there's some things that they're just going to take away playing cover 2. And when USC did a bunch of cover 2 into the boundary, Notre Dame basically said, well, guess we're not going to throw the ball to Malachi Fields today. In those situations. Like, no, there's things you can do to take advantage of that and to go at them. Cover 2 is not like this magical defense that just takes your boundary receiver away. No, there's some things it takes away, but there's plenty of things you can do against it, and Notre Dame's going to have to figure that out. So I like that matchup. And really, the only other one is Contavious Hutchins against the tackles. Notre Dame's tackles have been better lately, but if they have an off game, he's the kind of player that can give them problems. He's a guy that we talked about in the offseason as well, Trev, is, this is a guy that you have to keep an eye on. He's kind of stepping in as like the guy, and, he's had good production. He's got 20 pressures in 7 games. Obviously he missed a game this season. What game did he miss? Actually, let me go look that up. It wasn't the Louisville game. I thought I saw him out there against Louisville, but I could be wrong on that. Give me a second. It was the Pitt game. And that would make sense because Pitt had all day to throw against Boston College in that game. But he's a kid that like, he could give you some problems if your tackles have an off day. He's got okay size, but he's got some really nice athleticism, a decent array of moves. The final matchup for me is the tackles just have to play well. If they play well, if they play like they have the last few games, they'll be fine. You just can't have a step back game with your offensive tackles. And that's my final piece. You could also say, Mike Denbrock against Tim Lewis, because Tim Lewis is not, I shouldn't say he's not gonna, because we've seen coaches make dumber decisions than this, but I just have a hard time thinking he's just going to sit back and play base defense cover 2 against Notre Dame and say, well, let's see what our guys can do. I just don't think he's going to do that. So how prepared are you for the different things they're going to throw at him, pressure wise, run stunt wise, and be able to have some success?
Yeah, the matchup with Contavious Hutchins and the tackles I like as well. Unfortunately, they lost Donovan Ezeraku, who last season was a dude for them, 16.5 sacks, 20.5 tackles for a loss, playing for the Cowboys right now. Already has a sack so far in the NFL season as a rookie. So they're definitely missing him. But Contavious Hutchins, I'm with you. He's somebody, last season, Hutchins was 4th on the team in tackles for a loss with 5.5, and now he's just having an interesting year. I just don't think he's benefiting from being the only guy. He's more of a supporting cast role, but he is somebody that can give the tackles problems if they don't play discipline. So I'm with you there. But folks, that is going to do it for part 1 of today's show. Don't go anywhere. We're getting ready to talk Notre Dame's defense versus Boston College offense. But before we get there, Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, we greatly appreciate a 5-star review. Also, don't forget, we are doing a mailbag at the end of today's segment. We got 5 questions in so far. Make sure you get some more questions in to make sure we have a lot to answer once we're done talking about Notre Dame's defense and Boston College offense. And as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, in part 2 of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by FanDuel, we're talking Notre Dame's defense versus the Boston College offense. And I don't know how you feel about this, but big picture, before we dive into anything specifically, I think this is more of an intriguing matchup than Notre Dame's offense versus Boston College defense, because Boston College's offense, as much as they've struggled in the last couple of weeks, they made a quarterback change. They went back to Grayson James, who took over for Thomas Castellanos last season. They do still have pieces on this offense that can legitimately hurt Notre Dame. A lot of it is in the skilled department. Now, we said at the start of the show, at the start of this podcast, that if this was a 7-on-7 game, we do think that the spread would be a lot closer than 28.5 than what it is right now. But at the end of the day, football is a game played with 11 players on the field on both sides of the ball, 5 of those being the linemen, and that's where this unit has struggled. But Boston College's offense is, I don't want to say a big play away from hurting you, but they have the skill talent to hurt you if you're undisciplined against them.
Yeah, there's no question. And if you can't get after the quarterback, like that's the big thing, because they have legit receivers. We talked about this in the offseason. This is one of the better receiving cores Notre Dame's going to face. This now, obviously, Miami's ended up having a really good receiving core. Texas A&M has a really good receiving core. Purdue's was a little better than expected. Boise State had a solid receiving core. NC State's got a really good receiving core. USC has a really good receiving core. So they've played a lot of teams this season with good pass catchers. Arkansas is solid as well, especially Omega Blake. This group right here, though, is to me, Trev, top half of the group of receivers that you're going to face this year. This is top 5 or 6. And when you consider how many good receiving cores Notre Dame faces, that's an impressive thing to say. If you were 5th or 6th last year, you weren't very good because they didn't play the type of units that they faced this year. And you're like you see somebody in the chat, Michael Lynch said, you've got Pitt coming up with a good receiving core. Syracuse has a good receiving core. And even once you're done at the end of the year, you're going to still say this to me is one of the better receiving cores they're going to face when you look at tight ends and receivers. Lewis Bond leads the ACC in receptions this year, 56. He's got 547 yards. Reed Harris is a kid that we've talked a lot about this offseason, Trev. Big, tall, long kid that's got some juice. He can stretch the field. Last 2 games, he's had 7 catches for 105 yards, had 7 catches for 141 yards against Stanford. Early in the season, had 2 for 35 against Pittsburgh. This is a young man that's got the ability to stretch the field. He's got the ability to make you pay one-on-one if you're not disciplined. He can stretch the field, not just with his speed, which is good, but it's the combination of his speed plus his length that makes him dangerous. You could be hip to hip with him, and the quarterback has to throw the ball up, and he's 6'5" with long arms. He can just go out and play for the football. So I think that's Jeremiah Franklin, the tight end, is a good football player. He's a kid that you have to be worried about. Turbo Richard has 15 catches or 19 catches out of the backfield, and they do play a lot of 2 tight ends. Their number 2 tight end, Kalen Chudzinski, is, I believe, the son of Rob Chudzinski, right? The former Miami tight end, and I think he still coaches in the NFL, right? So there's some good DNA there, and he has 15 catches for 206 yards. So their 2 tight ends have caught 46 passes this season, Trev. So they're going to throw to that position as well. So there's legitimately some good weapons. I'll be honest with you, from a Notre Dame standpoint, you're happy they made the decision to bench Dylan Lonergan. And I understand he wasn't playing well. I get all that. But when Dylan Lonergan was on, he gave them their best chance to be successful. I wonder if part of this has to do with the fact that, he doesn't have great pocket presence. But that kid went from 268, 390, and 333 to just fell off the map. And I think part of that has to do with coaching. Part of that has to do with the offensive line. That's the kid that scared me as a thrower. Grayson James scares you a little bit more. Not scares you, but he's an okay passer, but he's more mobile. Not that he's a great athlete, but he's just a little bit more mobile. than what you were there. So the big surprise for me, Trev, is the fact that BC just hasn't been able to get the run game going at all. Turbo Richard's a good football player. He really is, but they just haven't been able to get him going at all. And you see the numbers there. They're 127th in the country in rushing. Like, they kind of make themselves one-dimensional. And for Notre Dame's part, you're going to have to try to keep it that way. But when you look at this BC football team, he's not a bad football player, Trev. You know, he's averaging 4.9 yards a carry. They just don't get him the ball consistently enough. He didn't play against Louisville, but in 2 of the last 3 games before that, he didn't get to 10 carries. Part of that's because you lost 48-7, 41-10, and then 38-23. You know, but this is also a kid who had 15 carries for 171 yards and 2 touchdowns against Cal. You know, he's a good football player, and you're going to have to make sure that they don't get going, because if BC can get that run game going a little bit, then you're going to be okay. And that's when I look at BC as a team, Trev, isn't that the thing that surprises you the most? Because you look at their offensive line left to right, they're 315, 310, 317, 315, and 320. They start a redshirt junior, a redshirt sophomore, redshirt senior, and a graduate player. So, like, there's only one guy that's not in his 4th year of college on their offensive line. And yet they've struggled to run the football. You'd think, and they're big, strong kids, you'd think they'd be better running the football, but they're really not. And that's, you know, that's the thing that you have to keep going, because if this becomes a bit of a track meet, Notre Dame will still win the game, but you're not going to get that impressive win that you think you are. And, you know, Lewis Bond's going to do a lot of things route-wise that Malachi Toney did to give you problems. Double moves, pivots, slants, nods, working the cross, working the middle of the field. You're going to have some answers for him. And then, you know, you've got to make sure your corners aren't getting super grabby with Reed Harris when he gets a step on him outside. That's really where the problem lies, where you say, okay, are they good enough talent-wise to hurt you? That's the one area where that answer is absolutely a yes.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, unfortunately for them, the issue of almost all of their problems stems from the offensive line. And it's reflective in not just the rushing numbers, but I think in some of the passing numbers too. I mean, you're 127th in the country in both yards per rush and rushing yards per game. You're 98th in the country in rushing touchdowns. Don't do a great job of preventing negatives. 44 tackles for a loss for 192 yards. You're not explosive in the run game. And then in the pass game, you know, you're 112th in the country in sacks allowed. You know, 7 interceptions on the season puts you at 92nd. I mean, look, I think that Dylan Lonergan's play needed to be raised. I don't think it was qualified enough to bench the kid. But part of that is he was under pressure and he was under duress. And Grayson James is a quarterback that will force it. I mean, part of the reason why Lewis Bond has 56 receptions on the season is they will just straight up force him the football. He is far and away their go-to target on offense. The next closest receiver has 31, and that's Jeremiah Franklin. For as much of a threat as, his name is escaping. For as much of a threat as Reed Harris poses, I mean, he has 24 receptions on the season. I mean, he has less than half of what Lewis Bond has. So they will try to force him the football, but in that, when your offensive line can't protect you, that leads to the high turnover numbers and interceptions as well. So the offensive line is giving this group a lot of headaches, and it's consistent with what we talked about with Notre Dame too. You can have Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and Malachi Fields and Eli Raridan and Jordan Faison and CJ Carr as your quarterback, but the offensive line doesn't handle business up front and do their jobs. A lot of that's going to be all for naught, and that's unfortunately what I think we're seeing with Boston College's offense.
Yeah, I mean, and when you look at targets, Trevor, Jeremiah Franklin and Reed Harris have combined for 94 targets in 8 games. They've caught 56 passes, so they're sub 60% in completion percentage when those two kids are targeted. But those 94 targets, Lewis Bond has been targeted 70 times by himself. Now, 78.6% completion rate when targeted, so that obviously helps.
Yeah,
but a lot part of that is because they're having to get him the ball in a lot of the quick game, and when you talk about forcing it, they're not giving him a ton of opportunities to go make plays, you know, after the catch, but he still does because he's a really talented player that can hurt you. You look at the average depth of target for him is 6.6 yards. That's 2 yards below their tight end. Like that's not good, you know. And so a lot of quick game, a lot of quick throws, and you're going to have to be disciplined because if you are playing off him or you make mistakes and he gets to square you up, he can hurt you. He can make you miss and hurt you. And he's a smart football player, veteran. I think I heard them talking when I was watching the Louisville game on TV last weekend that he's creeping up on, he's chasing Zay Flowers' all-time receiver records and some different things like that. So he's a good football player. But and him and Reed Harris are very different players, like completely opposite players. And I think that makes him kind of a dangerous 1-2 punch. I said that average depth of target for Lewis Bond is 6.6. You want to know why Reed Harris has a lot less targets? Because it's a bunch of deep balls. His average depth of target for him is 18.18 yards per target. So when they throw the ball to Reed Harris, they're throwing the ball downfield. And you have to make sure as an offense that you're prepared for that and that you're ready to handle that. I mean, to give you some context on how infrequently I'm saying this somewhat sarcastically, Reed Harris, because to your point, Trev, he's 25 targets below Lewis Bond. But Reed Harris on the Notre Dame offense will be tied for first in targets with Jordan Faison.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Jordan Faison's first with 45 at Notre Dame. And Lewis Bond has 70 targets this season. So now they've also had to throw the ball a lot more than Notre Dame. They've almost had about 100 more attempts because they're way less efficient than Notre Dame throwing the football. I mean, you see it here. Look at their passing numbers. They're at 7.2 yards per attempt. Notre Dame's just about 10 yards an attempt this season, but that factors into it. It's quick game, Lewis Bond, chain mover, good on first down. When they want a big play, they're going to go to Reed Harris. And you got to be prepared for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one last thing before we start diving more into the strengths of this offense. I know we kind of are already, but one of the other things too with Turbo Richard that this defense is going to have to be prepared for that I'm honestly surprised that they haven't tried to do a little bit more of is getting him involved in the pass game. They've tried. Turbo Richard and Jeremiah Love have played the same amount of games because Richard missed the Louisville game. They have the same amount of receptions on the season. So he is somebody that I think that you could get going in the passing game as well, especially considering what Notre Dame has given up to running backs out of the backfield as well. That's going to be something that I think
that is something. He is somebody that would concern me if I'm a Notre Dame fan. You can't let him get going. He kind of can do for their offense a little bit what Hollywood Smothers could do does in the NC State offense. It's just they're not as good as the NC State line and offense at getting him room to run. But they're very similar players. He's going to do and everything he does out of the backfield in the pass game is all in the backfield. It's getting him swings and screens and things like that. But you've got to make sure that Turbo Richard doesn't get going in this game, run game and pass game wise. Because if you get Turbo going and now you've got to commit an extra body to slowing down the run game or keeping him from making big plays in the pass game, now you get a little bit like, okay, now we have to go one-on-one with Reed Harris, or we maybe can't pay as much attention to Jeremiah Franklin, who gets free on a play action pass. Like it's kind of like last week against USC, make them one-dimensional and then force Grayson James to beat you. Because if it comes down to that, you're going to win this football game.
Now, the strengths for Boston College offense, we've obviously talked about a lot. It's the wide receivers, but one that we haven't really dove too much into on the flip side of that coin, Brian, is the offensive line. And like we've mentioned, it's kind of been the root of a lot of their issues on offense. But this has been a unit that has, I think, stunted the growth of this unit, unfortunately, because the skilled talent is impressive. I mean, we've been talking about the receiving core. You specifically brought up Boston College's receiving core before the season even started. We raised some questions about the offensive line, and unfortunately for the Eagles, that's came to fruition for them this season.
Kind of feel like you're saying that in a way where if Notre Dame locks down the receiving core this week, and you'd be like, well, Brian's the one that hyped them up. I didn't have anything to do with this. I said they suck. He's the one that brought it up this summer. No, I'm just kidding, Trev. But Brian, you specifically are the one who said they were good.
Brian, I think it was Backline.
You own that.
Yeah, I think you called me and said like they're the best receiving core you've ever seen. I don't know, man. But anyways.
Liar. All lies, dirty lies. But no, it is a good receiving core. And this is why and Turbo Richard's a good football player. But this is exactly why they've struggled right here, Trev. This part right here. And this is this is the thing where BC has really fallen off as a program more than any other. This is a program that used to produce NFL offensive linemen all the time. And what they've done in recent years, how bad they've been on the offensive line has really been a problem. And until they can figure that out, and there's just too many good, East Coast big boys to just not be better. But even last year, I mean, they were only at 4.1 yards a carry. They averaged 166 yards rushing per game. In the second half of the year, they went for 313 against Syracuse, 228 against North Carolina. They went for 263 against Florida State. And, yeah, I know they had a good rushing quarterback, but Thomas Castellanos only had 194 yards rushing last year. They didn't use him a whole lot running like they did 2 years ago when he was a 1,000-yard rusher. But, this is a team that has really fallen on hard times. The 22 team that Notre Dame beat averaged 63 rushing yards a game. I'm trying to look at the numbers here. They were at 198 in 2023 with the mobile quarterback. 2020 they were 101.7. That's so bad for Boston College. But then this is a team that in 2019 averaged over 250 yards a game with A.J. Dillon, and averaged 220 yards back in 2017. This is a team that used to just be able to pump out good running backs. I mean, think of Andre Williams, and obviously A.J. Dillon's a guy that should have been at Notre Dame. Thank you for that, Autry Denson and Brian Kelly. Could you imagine him and Josh Adams playing on the same offensive line in 2017? Goodness gracious, that'd have been fun to watch. But just look at some of the names. I'm just going to read through some of the draft picks that they've had on the offensive line over the years. 2011, Anthony Costanzo, first-round draft pick. 2008, Gosder Cherilus, first-round draft pick. 2007, James Martin, third-round draft pick. Jeremy Trueblood, an Indiana native, second-round draft pick. Chris Snee, Super Bowl champion with the New York Giants, second-round draft pick on the offensive line. Dan Coppin was a fifth-round draft pick, heck of a college football player. First-round draft pick in 1999. Damian Woody, that same year. Doug Brzezinski was a third-round draft pick from their offensive line. Pete Kendall, first-round draft pick in 1996. Tom Nalen, Denver Bronco great, was a seventh-round draft pick. One of the greatest offensive linemen to ever play for the Denver Broncos. Started on both of their Super Bowl teams, during his tenure. The two Super Bowl winners, I should say. I mean, this is a program that has a very long history of producing. I mean, heck, even as recently in 2019 and 2022, they had Zion Johnson in 22 and then Chris Lindstrom in 2023. So you're used to seeing these guys pump out good linemen, and they just haven't done that. And that, more than anything, has really held this team back in recent years, is just not being able to be able to hold up in the trenches. That's the one thing BC could always count on, is we can hold up in the trenches and then throw the ball a little, run the ball a little bit and make some big plays down the field.
It's not that I didn't believe you, but the number of averaging 63 yards a game rushing in 2022 was so shocking that I went and looked it up. That's so nuts. Their leading rusher in all 12 of their regular season games, 6 of those times their leading rusher was held to under 30 yards. That's that's insane. I'm sorry. I hate to derail us because you were just spitting right there, but that is nuts.
It fits to the point. I mean, they had 56 rushing yards against Notre Dame. The last 7 games of the season, they were held to less than 90 yards rushing. And in only one of those games did they go over 80. I mean, they went over 100 yards twice that year. They went for 111 against Maine and 144 against Louisville. Had 4 yards against Virginia Tech, 29 against Rutgers, 25 against Clemson. So they were not a good running football team. And this year they've been held under 100 yards 5 times already. They've been held under 120 yards in 6 of their 8 games. The only reason they're even where they are, Trev, and you look at the numbers, they're 127th in college football this year in rushing. And that's partly because they ran for 191 yards against Connecticut. I mean, they've been 4 yards per carry or greater in one game this year. That was against Cal. And they went for 178 that game. They had 2 good games, and everything after that's been trash. 191 against UConn, 178 against Cal. Their next highest rushing game was 116. It was this past week against Louisville. They went for 8.5 yards per carry against Cal. Their next best performance is 3.9 against UConn. Their next best performance is 3.2. In every other game, they've been sub 3 in rushing yards. It's pretty bad. But here's the thing: Turbo Richard's 4.9 per carry, Jordan McDonald's 4.4. But their quarterbacks have been sacked a bunch, and that's something that hurts them. So, yeah, their offensive line is the problem. That if Notre Dame's going to dominate this game, it has to be there.
Yeah.
If you don't dominate in the trenches, then this becomes a very, very much more different game. Notre Dame will win, but it's a game where, BC makes some big plays and they keep it a little bit more competitive than it should be. Score a few more points. And this is not the game to go back to your let's just sit back and, cover 7 and rush 4 and all that. You'll have more success in this game, rushing 4, but so it's not even the rush 4 part. It's the soft coverage, letting get the quick game out. Make Grayson James hold the football. Don't let Lewis Bond, catch the football in the quick game, force him to hold it, and you're going to dominate it, because we'll talk about some of these matchups here in a second, Trevor. But this is just not a strength of their team.
No, if the defensive philosophy remains, Boston College is going to struggle to get into the red zone. NC State has a better offensive line than what Boston College had, and NC State struggled to get into the red zone against Notre Dame.
Actually,
struggled to cross the 50-yard line. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. I mean, look, if the defensive philosophy remains, points will be at a premium for Boston College. That is absolutely for sure, and that has to remain. But in order to do so, there are some matchups that they're going to have to win, because right now the outlook for Boston College on offense isn't great. I wish I had some player props to give you. They haven't came out yet. With a game with this big of a spread, I'm not surprised. I guarantee those won't even be out probably until Thursday or Friday.
What is that up to now, Trev?
Is it still at 28.5? Yeah. The spread is still at 28.5, but the over-under has gone down by 2 points. That's because on FanDuel, Boston College's over-under in points went from 15.5, over-under 15.5 to over-under 13.5. So they are predicting a struggling day for Boston College on offense. That's for sure. That is for sure. But Brian, what are some of the matchups that you're paying attention to in this game?
I think the first one for me, Trev, and I think I said this to you when we first started getting together talking about this game. I said, if Boubacar Traore doesn't have a big day, I'm going to get a little bit concerned. I mean, their right tackle, and Boubacar plays left end for Notre Dame. Their right tackle is a big old kid, Kevin Klein. He's 6'7", 320, grad student. He just doesn't move well, Trev. He doesn't have great feet. He's a little bit slow out of his stance. He's a strong, tough kid, but he is just not good out of his stance. And I'd be very concerned about, if I'm their quarterback, I'd be very concerned about that matchup. And Boubacar just really dominating that matchup. And when you look at them, they're 112th in sacks allowed. And a lot of that has honestly come lately, that's the first matchup that Notre Dame needs to dominate. They gave up 5 sacks to Clemson. They gave up 7 sacks to UConn, and then 2 this past week. And so, this is an area where Notre Dame's defense needs to dominate. They need to dominate up front. And it's a lot of them. It's Bryce Young, it's Josh Burnham, it's across the board. But first and foremost, to me, it's Kevin Klein against Boubacar. And in 8 games this year, Kevin Klein has allowed 16 pressures. That's 2 per game. He's allowed 2 sacks, two hits on the quarterback, so 2 each, so 4. And this is a matchup that they should be able to dominate. It really is.
Yeah, on Pro Football Focus, as an offensive line, they've given up 87 total pressures across 8 games. 21 of those have resulted in sacks. I echo the same sentiment that you do about Boubacar, and then relate that to the rest of the defensive line. I'm where you are. One of the matchups that I'm actually interested to watch, and this isn't from necessarily a performance standpoint, I guess. I'm not worried about Leonard Moore who actually was just named to I believe he was just named to the semifinalist list for the Jim Thorpe
like
Award.
final 10, I think is whatever it is. It'll be semifinals. Yeah.
So shout out to Leonard Moore for that one. But I am interested to see how he does with Reed Harris. That is the biggest receiver that he will have faced this season, because Jacoby Lane was 6'4", 200 pounds, but they had him shadow Mekhi Lemon most of the game.
Right.
And so I'll be very interested to see how he does that with a big-bodied receiver like that. I mean, Reed Harris is 6'5", 217 pounds, who can also stretch the field vertically. He's not, a big, heavy-footed 6'5" type of receiver. He can push it downfield. So, that presents a different challenge to Leonard Moore. So, do I think that he's going to get cooked? No, I don't. Am I worried about it breaking open? No, I'm not. But this is the different type of matchup for Leonard Moore that he's faced. So that is another matchup. And then for Christian Gray, for how much they do like to stretch the field, I'm kind of lumping the cornerbacks into two here, or into one, with how much they do like to target Reed Harris down the field. Christian Gray is going to have to be ready for when they inevitably will take shots at him. So those are two that I'm interested in.
Yeah, and I'm very curious to see what Notre Dame does with the slot in this game, because it's going to primarily be Louis Bond. Do they view him as a big enough threat to put Leonard Moore on him again? I don't. I think he's a very good player, but I don't think he can take the game over the way Makai Lemon can. No. He's more of a chain mover. He can do some things down the field, but so do you have Devontae Smith and Dallas Golden stay on him? Do you let them get tested? I personally would. I would let them battle against Louis Bond. And then if he's giving you problems, you have your backup plan, which is, okay, fine, we're just going to put Leonard Moore on him. That would be kind of my plan. I hope that they give those guys a chance. I understood why they did it against Makai Lemon. Totally get it. I like Louis Bond a lot. I don't know that this offense is such that you have to do that with him. Not that he's not good enough. I don't know that this is the kind of offense where you need that to be what you do. But if you're not going to put Leonard Moore on him, then that matchup becomes very important. You're correct on the outside matchup, especially against Reed Harris. But how do the nickels hold up against him? Because if you want your third down defense to stay in a good position against an offense that's not very good on third down, where you can get hurt is with your nickels against Louis Bond on 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5. Beating them on slants and quick outs and double moves and, pivots, reverse pivots, things like that. That's a matchup that could get problematic and allow BC to move the chains enough to stay in this football game. So I think that nickel matchup is going to be very interesting, whether it's Dallas Golden or whether it's Devontae Smith or whether it's both of them playing in this game. But whoever it is, they're going to have to and hold up and then be smart too, because I could see them getting beat on like, oh shoot, I overplayed this outside cut route, but he's actually, doing a reverse pivot on me and I get grabby and hold him. And next thing you know, it's a first down because you committed a silly technical penalty. So I'm curious to see how they handle Louis Bond in the slot. If you look at PFF numbers, Trev, on the season, he's played 203 snaps in the slot and 113 snaps out wide. Most of the out wide snaps happen when they're in a 2 tight end set, but he'll move around a lot, but he plays twice as much in the slot as he does outside. So the outside guys have to have a plan for him, but then, your inside guys do. And that's what also makes him a little bit different than Makai Lemon, because Makai Lemon is almost exclusively a slot. And with BC, if they think that they can, if they think you're going to try to shadow Leonard Moore on Makai Lemon, I don't know, or excuse me, goodness gracious, Louis Bond, I think there's some things they could maybe try to do to take advantage of that, to say, hey, look, we're going to manipulate you then and move him around and get him in different spots. So I think that's going to be a very intriguing part of this matchup.
Agreed. And it feels like each week we're talking about, a slot receiver on an opposing team versus nickel. But look, man, besides the point, before I get into my final matchup that I'm watching, I would argue that Notre Dame's nickel corner has gone up against some of the best competition in college football this year compared to other nickel corners around the country. I mean, it's been insane.
Malachi
Tony, yep, Mario Craver, Makai Lemon. I mean,
Nitro Tuggle. Didn't he play some in the slot? Michael Jackson for Purdue. They had decent slots. They put Omega Blake in the slot a decent amount for Arkansas. You're correct. Who was the Keenan Jackson for NC State? Mm-hmm. And then obviously Makai Lemon. So yeah, they've had to go against some dudes in the slot now. They really have.
Yeah. But final matchup that I'm paying attention to is Tay Johnson versus Jeremiah Franklin. We talked earlier about how Jeremiah Franklin is by far their kind of second go-to target in that offense. He has 31 receptions, 18 of them have gone for first downs. He's 6'3", 244. Definitely more of a receiving threat than he is a blocking threat. Then on the flip side of the coin, you have Tay Johnson, who, when he was implemented or inserted into the starting lineup, Notre Dame secondary started to turn around for a multitude of different reasons that we've talked about a lot on the show. And I think that matchup is going to be interesting. I'll be interested to see what Bill O'Brien and the offensive coordinator does to get Franklin matched up on Adon Schuler. Not that I think that Adon Schuler is bad in coverage, but if it's between Adon Schuler and 6'2" to 6'3" Tay Johnson in coverage, I know which matchup I want to try to take advantage of. So all encompassing, I would say safeties on Jeremiah Franklin, but I think Tay Johnson's going to have some opportunities in this game to get himself a second interception against Jeremiah Franklin. So that's another one that I'll be keeping my eye on, Brian.
And I like how they move him around too. Like if you look at the film and then look at the PFF numbers, he's had 151 snaps this year in out wide or like detached. So either in the slot or out wide. But he's got 125 snaps where he's basically in line, either attached to the line or in like a wing position. And so that's going to put different people on him. And they do a pretty good job of getting him in some of those matchups, Trev, where you put the safety in a tough bind, where, you know, he's running a route off play action or he's blocking and running a delay. And so then your linebackers will turn them loose. Bill O'Brien's a smart, like creative offensive mind, and he'll do some things. And he likes to use Jeremiah Franklin for some of that stuff. You know, I could see something where, you know, he's front side and he kind of goes down and Grayson James rolls right and he gets up and runs backside and you're throwing the ball backside to him and they turned him loose. Or he's backside and he runs like a, you know, block and he lets you beat him inside and then he kind of works backside for a tight end throwback screen. You know what I mean? You know, running a wheel route, things like that to get you thinking. They're real creative with how they get Jonathan Franklin. That's the old UCLA running back. But they do a lot of things with Jeremiah Franklin to get him the football. He's their second most targeted pass catcher, Trev, to your point. And they're going to go after the safeties. And I would even throw in some of the linebackers into this conversation because they're going to try to use him to match up against those guys as well, which I would have been a lot more worried about that a month ago. But the way that Drake Bowen and Kingston especially have been in coverage the last month, really, the season, I like that matchup a lot better than I did a month ago on the safety level and the linebacker level. But, you know, he's one of those guys that if you don't have a plan for him, if you don't execute that plan, he can do some damage to you.
Well, folks, that's going to do it for part 2 of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast. But we're going to wrap up today with the daily mailbag, and we have some more questions in there. Feel free to keep pouring some in. But before we get there, be sure to hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel, whatever streaming platform you listen to us on. We would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. Also, make sure you're subscribed to the CFB Nation channel. Vince D'Addario and I are going live on Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern time for this week's edition of the Spread Option. And then earlier today, Brian was on with Bill Bender and Bill Trocchi talking about some LSU things. Some interesting topics came up. I watched it.
Yeah, I had a little battle with me and my guy Bender. I love Bill, but we had a little bit of battle about Notre Dame and his views on what the standard should be for Notre Dame. So he texted me afterwards how much he enjoys that. Just so you guys know, when Bill and I are going back at each other like that, that's two good buddies having fun talking ball. We always text each other afterwards like, dude, that was a lot of fun. You know, I love Bill, admire Bill greatly. I just think he's got some bad takes on Notre Dame. And so we went at it a little bit on one of those. But I appreciate those guys having me on the CFB Nation channel. But, yeah, definitely want to make sure you're subscribed to CFB Nation. And I got to tell you guys about the funniest part about that. So there's this notion that, like, Bill is an Ohio State guy because he lives in Columbus. Guys, he just lives in Columbus. He's not an Ohio State fan. I can promise you that. But he was getting all upset about it. And then afterwards, he showed that shirt, and he's like, you know what? I should have taken my jacket off. So he takes his jacket off post-show, and it's got a shirt that says Ohio written all the way down it. It's like 7 Ohios. And I was like, dude, if you'd have brought that out in the show, they would have lost it. But it's just kind of funny, you know, that stigma is there. He admits he's a Big Ten homer, but he's not an Ohio State homer. He just happens to live in Ohio, which I think is funny. But that would have been great if he would have ripped his shirt off and he's got the shirt that says Ohio all over it. Like it literally went all the way down the shirt said Ohio. It was awesome, dude. But love having back and forth with Bill. And I don't know what it is, but he likes to debate with me, and we have some good ones, and today was one of those days where we had some really fun discussions, and he said on the show too, like we talked about what's Notre Dame's playoff odds and stuff like that, and so that was a lot of fun. Had a blast with those guys.
Always fun. I love debating with people that can talk ball, so I understand where
Yes.
Bill's coming from. So
it's
those
always
are the best
coming from a place of respect, and Bill's has put some thought into it, done his homework. So that's why I enjoy debating with him.
100%. Be sure to check that out on the CFB Nation channel. And as always, folks, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, to wrap up today's show here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by FanDuel, we have a daily mailbag coming everybody's way. And again, if this does happen to be your first ever mailbag, be sure to put an MB for mailbag or a little mailbox emoji. That lets us know to set your question, comment, or concern aside, and we'll get to talking about it. But I'm ready to dive in. I've seen some good questions come through today so far. First one from Jacob Hayden. What are the vibes around Jaden Greathouse? Area for concern or still feeling out the situation?
Look, it's the same one we've had for a while, Trev. If Jaden Greathouse doesn't play this weekend, then I'll get concerned. If Jaden Greathouse plays this weekend, then obviously there was nothing to it. I can just tell you what I'm told, all right? I don't have a magic wand. I know there's been some frustration on his side on how he's being used, as there should be. But I was told he plans on coming back. You look at him during the game, he doesn't look like a guy that's getting ready to not be with his teammates anymore. I don't think Marcus Freeman would allow him to be around the team the rest of the season if he was going to transfer, just like we saw with Jaden Mickey. Marcus Freeman thinks the world of Jaden Mickey, and the Notre Dame players think the world of Jaden Mickey. But when Jaden told them that he was going to redshirt and transfer, he wasn't around the team anymore. And so meaning like if he's healthy to play and he chooses not to play, then they know he's not going to play. And I don't think they let him around the team. So the fact that he's been on the sideline cheering, smiling, congratulating teammates tells me that he's legitimately injured and plans to play when he's healthy. That's what I've been told. Now, if he doesn't play this weekend, then I'm a little bit more concerned about it. But I just think people need to just kind of let it play out a little bit, and we'll have a much better sense of it in this game. Because, I mean, look, he's at the point, Trev, where I believe he played in 4 games, correct? Played in the first 4 games of the season. So it's not like he can come back and play in the last couple, but still sit out a year. I mean, he basically would have to sit out the regular season and then come back for the playoffs. And I don't think Notre Dame's going to allow him to do that if that was the plan. So there's nothing about his body language or presence that makes me think he's made the decision not to play anymore. So I can only go by what I know, not theories or conjecture or whatever else.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean there's not validity to there being a frustration on his end about how he's used. I'm frustrated with how he's been used. Trevor's frustrated with how he's been used. So if we're frustrated, he is. Yeah. But there's just nothing. Like, you can see body language of a player who's upset, who's thinking like, I don't know if I want to be. I mean, we talked about this with Steve Angeli during the spring game. Like, he had the body language of a kid who was like, I'm done. I'm not going to play here anymore. Not that he was upset, but like he knew he was getting beat out. And I just don't see that body language with Jaden Greathouse. So until proven otherwise, I'm just not going to continue wasting time. This isn't an insult. It sounds insulting, but I don't mean it. Wasting time asking, what's this going to – I've asked the question. I've been told he plans to play. Until that's no longer the case, that's all I can work with. And I hope that he does come back, because if he comes back and they start to use him appropriately, then this team's going to be dangerous. And that won't be the first game back. He doesn't come back, the numbers that Will Pauling's put up, and all of a sudden Jaden's getting 85% of the slot snaps. But you build him back up into that, but you make sure that you get him the football when he does get back. Because if you can get Jaden Greathouse going, this offense becomes incredibly difficult to defend.
Same page.
And I think CJ Carr needs to get – they need to force that relationship between him and CJ Carr on the field.
Yep. Raymond Harton, are you guys content with the current 2026 recruiting class? If not, what position or positions would you go after? Mine would be one more defensive tackle. Thanks.
I'm good with the 26 recruiting class. I mean, they've got a good quarterback. They've got 2 great running backs. They've got a really good deep receiving core. I was watching some senior film the other day. Bubba Frazier is a dude this year, Trev. Caden Finley's having a great year. Braden Robinson's having a great year. I haven't got to Dylan Faison's having a great. I haven't got to Devin Fitzgerald film yet. I watched Ian Premer's film the other day and Preston Frizel's film at tight end. They're absolutely monsters at tight end this year. Linebacker, again, I'm fine with where they are right now. Same with the secondary. I love their secondary class. As far as D tackle, the reason I wouldn't do that is because, number one, I don't know that there's a lot of D tackles out there that move the needle for you next year. And they're recruiting some guys in 2027 that can play right now when they arrive in 2027. I don't know that there's a D tackle out there that's going to help you more than someone you can get in the portal. That's kind of where I'm at. So if a top D tackle target starts showing some interest in you, then sure, you talk to them, and I'd be okay with that. But Trev, I look around and I just don't see those players. And I don't know that there was a ton of players that were on the board like that to begin with. And the guys that were that good didn't give Notre Dame the time of day. You're not going to flip Preston Carey from Georgia. You know, it's not an option. There just weren't a ton of great D tackles on the board that Notre Dame could want. You know, Jamian Winfield, the kid from Texas, is committed to USC. He's a heck of a player, but they couldn't get him into school. You're going to flip Kari Wilder from Ohio State. Now, if he wanted to come to Notre Dame, flip and take him, absolutely. But he never liked really Notre Dame. His family did, but he wasn't all that interested. And, I mean, what do you say? Well, yeah, do you really want to play D tackle at Ohio State, dude? Like, yeah, sure do. You know, so I just don't know that player's out there, and I wouldn't force the issue. Part of filling up in a class isn't just about your needs, but you got to make sure you're taking players that can really help you. And when you look at how good the 27 board is, I mean, the 27 board is absolutely loaded. And not just, I mean, some of the guys we've talked about, but, you know, obviously we know about, Braden Parks, who Notre Dame's super high on. They've already got a commitment from Richie Flanagan. Devin Robertson's a big-time recruit. Sam Lejeune is a guy that Notre Dame likes a lot. And then they just went and saw Carlos May this past week, and they loved what they saw from him. He's a really good player. So I would much rather take an extra guy next year than worry about that. I say that just go to the portal and get a guy. And that's what I would do, Ray. But, yeah, I'm very happy with the 26 class. Again, I haven't watched everybody yet. Still working my way through it. But there's nobody that I've seen yet that's like, uh-oh, I'm a little concerned about that. They might want to find somebody to replace that guy. I mean, Jamin Osborne and Jonas Walton, dudes this year. So I'm very happy with that class. My focus is on 2027 at this point.
Another one from Jacob Hayden. How come there always seems to be a favoritism issue with coaching playing their guy and maybe not the best guy?
I don't think it happens all the time. I think it happens enough where it annoys me. But, I mean, look, coaches are human beings, right? They fall in love with certain things. They have relationships with certain players. There's a trust with certain players. I also think that the most talented guy is not always the best guy. That's the other thing. There are some guys that I'm like, that guy needs to help you out. That guy needs to play. There's other guys that people are begging to see on the field that I'm like, yeah, I know where you're coming from, but I don't know that really works right now, or if he's ready right now. That's human nature. And I'd like to say that I avoided that, but I'm pretty sure there's other receivers that were on my team who didn't play as much that would probably think that I had favoritism towards a guy that I played more. That's the nature of it. So, yeah, but it's about relationships and trust.
Yep.
It's also about ego. I recruited this guy, and he was a 3-star, and I, kind of went hard for him, and I want to be proven right. There's a little bit of that to it as well with some coaches, not all, but some, because again, they're human.
Yep, I agree completely. From Jay-Z, would you rather be with 2 close losses to top 10 teams or 1 loss to a terrible team at home? I think I would take this year over last year.
It's a great thought, Trev. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, like face value, sure. Again, like we've seen it, I think it depends on how the rest of college football plays out. If we're just talking Notre Dame specifically, I guess big picture, I would prefer 11-1 over 10-2, depending on who that loss was to. two close losses to top 10 teams. I just hate being the team of hanging their hat on. We lost, but at least it was close. That gives me too much resemblance of a previous regime, and I don't like doing that too much. But Jay, to answer your question, a lot of this comes down to the overall state of college football. How much chaos is going to happen, how much chaos will continue to happen. I mean, who knows? Notre Dame could end up being a higher ranked team last year with one loss to Northern Illinois than they will be this year, potentially in the final playoff rankings, to two really close losses to two top 10 teams potentially ranked above them in the playoffs. So face value, that's tough for me specifically to answer. I would probably go, honestly, one loss, because I hate losing. And I know that's kind of a simple answer, but if I don't have to do it twice, like, I understand the bad loss at home, a really bad loss, but that's tough. I'm kind of in between, but I think I would still rather just have one loss than two, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I'm torn. I think for a playoff resume, honestly, I think the two losses is going to be viewed. This is where I think people are missing the boat on this Notre Dame's team's ranking. I think these two losses are going to look better than the one loss to Northern Illinois last year on a playoff resume. Personally, I'm with Trevor. I just would rather have one really bad weekend at home early in the season than go dominate the rest of the season. I'd rather be in that situation. I think the committee's going to look at it a little bit differently, though.
Agreed.
I'm going to bring this up. This is a question that came in later from Nathan Williams, but I'm going to bring this up because it's being addressed, and I've talked about it before. I'm going to talk about it again in hopes that we can not have to keep talking about it. So I'm going to try to definitively answer it this time.
Why does Marcus Freeman's name keep popping up as a make him say no candidate for these jobs, insinuating that he's not leaving, but nobody is talking about guys like Dan Lanning or Ryan Day?
Number one, it would be pointless to go after Ryan Day. Like, there is no better job that Ryan Day could leave Ohio State for in college. If Ryan Day's not coaching at Ohio State next year, it's either A, he retired, B, he was in the NFL, or C, he got fired. Well, I don't think one and A and C are going to be options. It would just be about, does he go to the NFL? So what that would make their clickbait desires too great. I have seen people talk about Dan Lanning, but there's this perception in the media world that is the same stupid perception that I've pushed back on for years, that Notre Dame doesn't have the resources to keep up with in Oregon. Like, I think that's kind of nonsense, but whatever. It is what it is. So why would he leave Oregon for Florida? Why would he leave Oregon for LSU? That's part of it. And I think the final part of it is because Marcus Freeman's a hot name. He's a very likable coach. He's a respected coach. He's achieved success that Dan Lanning has not achieved. And so you're gonna go look at him and talk about him. And he's a Notre Dame guy. So every time they talk about him, Notre Dame fans are going to flock to that article and click on that article nonstop, and then come on podcasts and ask us questions about why does his name keep being mentioned. This isn't just Notre Dame fans. I was asked this question by Cole Kabelic today, so I'll bring that up as well. But look, I think part of it too is also a compliment that he is the hot coach. He is the guy that people look at and say, that guy can coach, that guy can recruit. He can recruit to even Notre Dame. Well, so could Charlie Weiss. It's the stigma of, oh, Notre Dame's a really hard place to recruit to. And I'm like, it's harder than other places. But if you're the right coach and Marcus Freeman is the right coach, you can absolutely have great success here. I think we've said it is harder to do it at Notre Dame. And this isn't in no way is meant to disparage Marcus Freeman. It's meant to be a compliment because he is the right kind of coach, because he can recruit like Charlie at the top end level, but his classes have more balance. Charlie's great classes would always be missing this or missing that, but he can also coach. And that's where Coach Weiss always had issues, is he just couldn't develop and coach players. So there's a lot of people that want Marcus Freeman. And honestly, if you're an AD, you do make Marcus Freeman tell you no. Man, that's a no-brainer. I mean, what if you like, let's say LSU went and hired somebody, and then after the fact, Nick Saban says, I was actually interested in going back to LSU and coaching again, but they never called. Could you imagine what that would do you say there's 2 guys you're going to call, right? 3 guys you're going to call right now. And one of them I personally wouldn't call, but I think a lot of people will. You're going to call Urban Meyer, you're going to call Nick Saban, and you're going to call Marcus Freeman.
Yeah.
That's just what it's going to be.
Flat out, plain and simple. I mean, the recipe is not that difficult to understand. And Nathan, this isn't a direct shot at you. We've just gotten this question a lot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Marcus Freeman is one of, if not the hottest coach in college football. I think he's still under 40 years old, if not right at 40 years old. He has led Notre Dame now in what seems to be potentially back-to-back years making the college football playoffs. He's going to get more clicks than Lance Leopold will. But I say Lance Leopold because he'd be very qualified for some of these jobs that are open. But what's going to get more clickbait, the head coach at Notre Dame or the head coach at Kansas? Like, right. It's not always this deep underlying could it be, because he might not be as happy because one time in a press conference he alluded to that. No, it's just his name drives clicks. And that's
it right there. That's it right there.
That's what it is.
This notion, I got asked this by Cole Kubelik. I was on with Cole and Greg McElroy this morning, and Cole asked me, he goes, there's rumblings out there, there's reports out there that Marcus Freeman's not happy at Notre Dame. And Cole wasn't spreading this. Cole's heard this. I've been told that, I don't know if this is true because I don't listen to their shows, but I've been told that Paul Feinbaum said something like that, and I was told that Josh Pate said something like that. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's out there because Cole wouldn't have asked me about it if it wasn't out there. And I just think it's utter nonsense, and I think it's just lies. I think it's people that are trying to get clicks, or it could also be just some booster. Boosters love to talk to the media, and they make up a lot of crap, and that's true of some at Notre Dame. And I could see some booster telling somebody so he can be, in the know that Marcus Freeman's not happy, and we're going to make a run at Marcus Freeman. And I've talked to people that say boosters at LSU are going to do whatever they can to get Lane Kiffin, and I've talked to another person who told me that the boosters like Lane Kiffin, but they're not going to give them. Like, okay, well, which one is it, right? Because there's different people saying these things, but a lot of it's just engagement farming. It's really what it is. On top of Marcus Freeman being the hot coach, and look, Dan Lanning's had a lot of success. He's also a bit weird. He's a little nuts. He where Marcus Freeman is intense on the field, but he's classy. He's respectful. He's respected. He's more of like what you partake as like the head coach, where Dan Lanning still acts like the defensive coordinator, losing his mind after me. I was like, is this guy high after the Penn State game? I'm like, what is this? Why is his face red like that? Like, he's just a little out there. Now, it works for Oregon. I'm not taking shots at Dan Lanning, but what I'm saying is if you're going to look at like his personality, jumping in the pool with recruits and stuff, and then you're looking at Marcus Freeman, who would never dream of doing something like that because he has too much class, that's the guy you're going to want to pump for head coaching jobs. And Notre Dame's a bigger brand. It just is. So all those things are reasons why. But, folks, I'm telling you, Marcus Freeman is not going to LSU. He's not going to Penn State. He's not going to Florida. This is all clickbait stuff. And he said at the end of yesterday's press conference, he's like, that's why I'm so – basically paraphrasing, this is why I'm happy that I have this job. So, I know that some of you are not going to believe me, or you're going to believe me until you see another tweet about it, or some other podcast talks about it, or some SEC person or ESPN person talks about it, and then you're going to be worried again. If it's coming from me, John Bryce, Tim Priester, Tim O'Malley, Pete Sampson, Pete Thamel, or Ross Dellinger, if it's coming from one of those people, then be concerned about it. If it's not coming from one of those people, ignore it. Just letting that one sit in there for a little bit, aren't you? I dig it. Let people ingest it. Take it in. Mm-hmm. Take it in.
USMA 87. If the offensive line and defensive line players weren't so thin in terms of availability, would you like to see some gimmick plays with Will Black getting the ball on offense?
No. I don't want players. I don't want anyone other than their skill players touching the football.
I want to see Will Black play left tackle. That's what I want to see.
Yeah. We're crazy.
From
Not
J.
that.
Lynn,
I'm just responding to
yeah.
something else in the chat.
From J. Lynn G. Any idea what percentage of Alumni Stadium will be Notre Dame fans?
I'd say probably 25, 30% at the most. Notre Dame doesn't take over stadiums the way that other places do. They did they just don't. And I don't know that this game is one that like, oh my God, my dream destination. You're going to see a lot of East Coast people wanting to be there. But there's going to be some other East Coast people that are like, I'm not paying the kind of money to go watch them, boat race a 1-7 Boston College team. It'll be a decent amount of BC Notre Dame people there, but it won't be like the invasion like we saw from Ohio State a few years ago or Texas A&M or Georgia back in 2017. It won't be like that.
From IM Tenzin, which do you think is more likely after breaking it down? Notre Dame 77-0 or Notre Dame 31-28?
I mean, honestly, the way this Notre Dame team has played several years now, I'd honestly say 77-0, and that sounds kind of crazy, but I mean, the reality is, Trev, is when Notre Dame wins, it's usually not overly competitive.
Yeah,
I mean, go ahead.
It's not so much the Notre Dame score that separates this for me. It's the Boston College score. Look, the last time Notre Dame had a shutout was against Boston College. Now that was at home, but I would argue that Boston College team is a little bit more put together than this Boston College team they're getting ready to play on
And
Saturday.
Zay Flowers. I mean, they had some legit pass catchers too.
Yep. I think Boston College is more likely to score 0 than 28 points. So it's not necessarily just Notre Dame 77 or 31. It's more so the Boston College score. But if I had to pick between one of the two, it's 77-0. I think would be more likely, as crazy as that sounds.
Here's the scores of the not great teams that Notre Dame has played in recent years: 36-7 versus NC State, 56-30 against Purdue, 49-14 versus Army, 35-14 versus Virginia, 52-3 versus Florida State, 49-7 against Stanford, 66-7 against Purdue. I would argue that Purdue might be the closest team to them, although they're not as bad as that Purdue team. 56-23 versus Stanford, 45-7 against Wake Forest. When they play teams like this or worse, like, NC State or worse, they tend to not be close games. So I don't think they're going to win 77-0, and I don't think they're going to win 31-28, but I think it's going to be closer to the 77-0 than the 31-28.
Same page here, man.
That's my take.
From Sean Jeter, it's February 26th, and Notre Dame is still busy celebrating a natty. Which teams from the pre-playoff era will be mentioned as teams who could have had a similar run?
It's a great question, Sean. I dig that. Honestly, I'd probably have to go back a lot longer than maybe a lot of people think that they should. I don't think some of the best. I think the 2018 team is probably Brian Kelly's only team that could have gone on the 3 or 4 game run because they could score and they had elite line play. I don't think the 2012 team had enough offense to go win 3 or 4 games. I don't know that the 2017 team would have been able to throw the ball well enough. I don't think the 2020 team was as talented as the other teams. Maybe 05 Notre Dame. That would be the only other one that I would consider. And prior to that, you'd have to go back to 93, honestly.
From a talent perspective, Sean, I would say 2015 might have a shot. I just wouldn't want to watch Brian Van Gorder game plan for Alabama, Indiana, or Ohio State's offense.
And that's the problem.
Because of 2015, I did watch him game plan for Ohio State's offense, and I didn't like what I saw. So that would be. But from a talent perspective, especially at the top, it doesn't have the depth that this team does. But from at the top, yeah, it would have been fun to watch Jalen Smith and Will Fuller in a 4-team college football playoff. That's for sure, or a 4-game college football playoff.
Now, Lou Holtz would have had several teams that I would have liked to have seen make that run: 88, 89, 91, 92. 90, 93. I mean, honestly, I just named every team. From 88 to 93, I think every one of those teams could have maybe made a run.
Yeah.
Yep. But 05, 18, I'm with you on 15. 15 is probably their most talented team. But not with Brian Van Gorder. at D. I mean, I don't know they beat Indiana last year with Van Gorder, defensive coordinator. I think Indiana would tore him up.
Yeah.
They definitely don't beat Penn State if he's their D coordinator. So, yeah.
Tommy Guns with the NFLPA investigating the playing surface at Heinz Field for safety issues. Any chance Pete tries to get that game moved?
I don't know a lot about that. I'm reading an article here that talks about the player outrage over the field. I thought I heard them talk about during the Pitt NC State game that they have changed the surface since then. That the new field they played on was only a week or two old, so I think they're trying to adjust that and fix that. But I honestly don't know what recourse Pete Bavacqua has, and I mean that seriously. I don't know what recourse he has to get them to change the game. So I and Tommy, you texted me earlier about this, and I've been looking it up, but yeah, I don't know what they could do. I don't know what they could do. So I'm reading the ESPN article about it, and it sounds like they think the field sucks and the grass is bad or whatever, but I don't know what they could do. They're not going to not play. So I honestly don't know. I don't know what the options would be. Could they negotiate with Pitt to get him to move the game? I don't know. Would Pitt be willing to do that? I mean, if it's about player safety, you think Pitt would also care about the field their players are on. But I do believe that they put a new sod down for the NC State game. I don't know if you watched that game, Trev, but they were talking about that during the game. They were talking about how they put a new sod down. So I don't know if they've rectified the problem since then or what it is. But
I think the toughest part about that is, unlike other teams that Notre Dame has played before in the past, like, when Navy, they'd play them at MetLife, or when they played Georgia Tech, it wasn't on Georgia Tech's campus, it was at Mercedes-Benz. The difference here is, like, this is just Pitt's home field. Like, this is just where they play home football games. So that would be the difficult part, because if this was like a Georgia Tech situation, they could just go play on Georgia Tech's campus. But for Pitt, it would go from basically being a home game to a neutral site game, which would be tough to negotiate.
You can't play at Duquesne. It's not enough people, not enough stands. Like literally, there's just not enough stands. There's high school fields bigger with more stands than what Duquesne had. But I don't, and they're not going to move it out of the area, because then you lose all the financial benefit of hosting a game against Notre Dame. So I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know what they could do. But like I said, I do think that it would seem that Pittsburgh has taken steps to fix the problem with the like I said, with putting the new sod down. I'll look into that more, Tommy.
Another one from I Am Tenzin. Could you make a complete coaching staff of all the fired head coaches, or as close as possible?
Well, you don't have quite enough yet. You've had 8 firings so far. So, I mean, Sam Pittman could coach O-line.
Yep.
James Franklin could be your receivers coach. Trying to think of what Brent Pry could be your D coordinator, maybe. I'm trying to think. Deshaun Foster could coach your running backs. I'm trying to think of who else has been fired so far, Trev.
Brian Kelly could be the chef.
Oh, there you go. See, I think that's a little bit harsh. I think he could be your recruiting coordinator. He loves recruiting.
He does.
He really does. He does. He could be your golf coach, your golf coordinator.
I was just about to say groundskeeper.
There you go.
Yeah, groundskeeper for.
There you go. I'm trying to go through and just remind myself who's been fired so far. I mean, Trent Dilfer could coach your quarterbacks, although I would never let him anywhere close to my quarterbacks. So I'm going to go, let's see, fired coaches 2025. So, I mean, you don't have enough guys. Brent Pride said be your D coordinator. He was a pretty good D coordinator. Billy Napier could coach something, tight ends. He's not calling my offense. He's a terrible offense coordinator. I already have James Franklin coaching receivers. Oh, Mike Gundy. I'm sorry. I'm going to remove Trent Dilfer. Trent Dilfer can go coach my left outs. And Mike Gundy's going to coach my quarterbacks. So, yeah, Troy Taylor, no, he's an offensive guy too. Trent Bray could be my linebackers coach. There's a lot of guys that have been kind of coach St. Jay Norvell. He's also a receivers guy. So, yeah. I'll let Trent Dilfer and Brian Kelly go park cars at the stadium when we have home games.
Or you could just host a Christmas party and have them think that they were invited and then park cars anyways.
There you go. That'd be a nice payback for Brian Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
Since he actually did that to coaches back in the day.
To Matt LaFleur and Robert Saleh.
Yeah, how'd that go for him? That guy. Oh boy. All right, let's get to some more questions.
From Tristan 1776, you can magically obtain one of the three and add them to this team: Justin Yoon, Zach Martin, or Brady Quinn.
Oh, man, that's actually tougher than it should be. And Brady Quinn's not in the conversation for me. Brady Quinn's a heck of a player, but I think they're fine at quarterback. Part of me wants to go easy answer Zach Martin and just put him at left tackle, and then Joe Rudolph would probably move him inside the guard. But which I'm fine with. Whatever, it is what it is. He was a Hall of Fame guard in the NFL, but he's pretty darn good flipping left tackle for Notre Dame also. But you put him in the starting lineup, like just whoever's guard, whoever's tackle. Imagine Zach Martin right now and Anthony Knapp next to each other, with Gerby Lambert and Emil Wagner, Joe Otting. That's a pretty darn good offensive line. But the other part of me is like, you still should be pretty good on the offensive line. Could you imagine if you had the most accurate, trusted kicker of my adult life in Justin Yoon?
Yeah. I would go Justin Yoon.
You're biased.
I am biased. It's for the brand, baby. I need it. I need it in my life. I either need Justin Yoon at kicker or Charles Dew needs to start taking reps at nickel, man, because I need something for the brand.
But in all seriousness, to your point about Justin Yoon, that's not why Trevor would want Justin Yoon. We just like to have some fun talking about that. It's because he's the most reliable kicker of Notre Dame, of my lifetime for Notre Dame.
Yeah.
He was unbelievably good as a kicker at Notre Dame. So it's like that would be something I'd like to have for sure. But how do you not say? How do you say no to Zach Martin though, or Brady Quinn?
Yeah,
it's a win-win-win, buddy. But I'd either go Zach Martin. The other question is, if you had Zach Martin on your offensive line right now, and I'm talking 2012, 2013 Zach Martin, not even NFL Hall of Famer Zach Martin. I'm just talking about what they were at Notre Dame. If you had that version of Zach Martin, would you need a field goal kicker? I mean, that's the other part of it. You know what I mean? Like, what, to make it 41-10 instead of 38-10? I just go for it. Make it 45-10. You know what I mean? So, yeah, that's a good one. Very good one.
I am Tenzin. Would you prefer to beat Ohio State in the early rounds of the playoff or in the title?
Yes. Don't care. Just if you're a Notre Dame fan and you want Notre Dame to win a title, you hope that it has to go through Columbus, that team in Columbus. I'm a big believer, if you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. And I don't want to go through the end of the season where you win a title and you're like, man, but we didn't get that shot at the Buckeyes. That's kind of where I'm at. But
my answer for this has actually changed since the preseason. Because in the preseason, I said I'd rather have them in the early rounds because I thought that Ohio State, if I'm being honest, wasn't going to be undefeated at this point. Actually, I think I did have them undefeated at this point. No, I didn't, because I didn't think Texas was going to be this bad. So I thought Ohio State was still going to be good. I thought they were going to win the Big Ten. I thought they were going to make the playoffs. But my argument at the time was you would have heard a lot of, you beat Ohio State without Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson and Emeka Egbuka, who's tearing it up in the NFL right now. And they lost 8 starters on defense. My tune has changed a little bit because this team looks better than what I thought that they were going to look like. And they already looked good, And so, I would like to beat them either or, early rounds or the title. So this answer has actually changed for me a little bit since the start of the season.
Yeah, because before it was like you'd want to play them the title game because then they would have earned they're good enough. But you play them in the quarterfinals, it's still going to be, that's a really good football team that you had to beat. But I just feel if you want to be the man, you've got to beat the man. And right now, Ohio State is the man. And if you're Notre Dame and you have pride in your program, winning a title is winning a title. You've got to win 4 games. That's fine. And I'll be happy no matter what. But it would be a little bit of extra sweet something if you're able to beat Ohio State on the way.
Oh, yeah. Agreed. From Doug Nimke, what are your thoughts on the 24-team playoffs? I'm not a fan of 4 guaranteed spots for each of the Power 4 conferences and 2 for the Group of 5.
I think a 24-team playoff idea is really stupid. I'm just going to say it, Doug. And this isn't Doug's idea. Doug is there's people out there advocating for it, so he's asking about that. But hard pass. Hard pass.
Yeah.
I think it's stupid. Absolutely stupid.
Yeah, I mean, that would be insane. 4 guaranteed spots for each Power conference. I mean, don't get me started. I think that is a terrible idea. I do.
That's how you cheapen the regular season. Anyone's expanded playoffs better for the regular season. No, it's not. So we can find out which 8-4 team has got to win their last game to get in. Just give me a break with that mess.
Mm-hmm. Tommy Guns, Notre Dame's line plays similarly to 2 weeks ago. Notre Dame rushes for under 500.5 yards. Well, T Guns, I was just about to say. I mean, I would be interested to see what some of the FanDuel lines are going to be when they do come out. Brian, I'm curious. When we talk about FanDuel a lot on the show, we kind of read off what some of the lines are. But since they aren't out yet, in all seriousness, to kind of also answer some of Tommy Gunn's question here, what do you think some of the lines will be? What do you think some of the over-unders will be set at? Or I guess what would you set them at?
If I had to predict, I would have Jeremiah Love at 112.5 yards. I'd set Jadarian Price at 75.5. I mean, this is a BC team that rush defense wise isn't very good.
Yeah,
they give up 317 to Louisville. They gave up 226 to Clemson. They gave up 172 to Pitt. I mean, UConn, they held under 100 yards, but UConn's, I mean, it's a G5 team, and they're not great running the football. You can look at Pitt and say, well, Pitt only rushed for 172 yards and 4 yards a carry. It's like, well, dude, Pitt's only averaging 119.5 yards per game this year. That was literally their greatest output of the season from a yard standpoint, so gave up 213 to Stanford. Stanford is not a good football team. They're not a good offense. So giving up 213 to Stanford is not good. Stanford's highest output of the season after the 213 against BC is they went for 177 against against Hawaii. Their next best performance is 132 against Florida State. And every other game after that, the other 5 games, they've been held to 75 yards or less. They went for 5.8 yards per carry against BC. They went for 4.1 against Hawaii. Their next best output is 3.1 against Florida State. This is a bad rush defense. A really bad rush defense. I mean, Michigan State is only averaging 122 yards per game on the season. They went for 22 yards above that average against Boston College. So they had their second best yards per carry average of the season against BC. The only time they were better was against Youngstown State. This is a bad rush defense, and Notre Dame's run game is pretty good. So even with the 2 new starters in the offensive line, I would still go with those kind of numbers.
Yep, I agree. I would have those numbers around the same. I would honestly put CJ Carr's passing numbers also relatively high. I'd probably have him around 272.5.
Oh, wow,
yeah, he's had a trend so far this season where he has not sniffed 300 and either has gone over. It's a pattern. I mean, he had 136 against USC, 342 against NC State, 189 against Boise State, 354 against Arkansas, 223 against Purdue on 12 attempts, and then 293 against Texas A&M. So I would probably put his around the 272.5 mark. Jordan Faison will probably be leading the team in receiving yard odds. So yeah.
And to your point on the Purdue game, if that was a 4-quarter game, CJ Carr is over 300 yards.
Oh, yeah.
Easy. Good question, Tommy. But this isn't the 2017 offense. So, no, I don't see the 500 yards coming.
Tommy Guns with a buy or sell. Boston College tries to target Christian Gray, but since they don't have the athletes of other teams, Gray has 2 picks and causes a third and allows less than 5 catches for 50 yards.
It's possible, certainly, if he plays this game. Yeah. Yeah, certainly. It's possible.
Yeah, the only pushback that I have there, Tommy, I'm not going to push back on the numbers or even Christian Gray's ability to do so. Where I would push back is the athletes of other teams. This is a good receiving core. I understand that Boston College is 1-7, but we just spent 45 minutes in the second segment of the show talking about the one bright spot of this team is their receiving core. You know, Lewis Bond and Reed Harris are good receivers, and that duo, I would take that duo over any duo at Purdue. You could make the argument you take that duo over a duo at NC State, over a duo at Boise State. So now we're in contention with, USC. We're in contention with Miami, and then we're in contention with Texas A&M. Those are probably the 3 best offenses that they've played this year from an overall record standpoint. I know Arkansas is also in that conversation as well, but from a duo standpoint, I like Omega Blake. I don't know who else I'm taking from Arkansas's receiving core. So the only pushback that I have is that the receivers aren't like athletes of the other teams. But outside of that, I'm with Brian. I think that's absolutely possible.
Agree. We're just kind of going in order. So Tommy had a few of them there.
Right on. Do you think it'll be a net positive that Notre Dame spent time during the bye prepping for Navy?
Yeah, I do. I don't like when they take time away during the week of a team to do that, but early in the bye week, I have no problem with that. It's just about, because you're not like doing like a full Navy install. You're just doing some things to get used to the alignments, to get used to the option action. You're getting it in their head. And then next week when you start the Navy prep, there's some things you've already laid the foundation for. And honestly, doing Navy prep isn't even just about getting your defense ready. Extra Navy prep is also about getting your scout team offense ready to then go into the week of prep to say they've already done the stuff they need to do to lay the foundation to know they can go out and put in the work against them as well. So, yes, I absolutely believe it's positive. And look, would I have felt as great about it if Notre Dame is getting ready to go play Texas A&M next weekend? No, but they're getting ready to play BC. So spending a couple days during the week, early in the week, especially doing some Navy prep, no problem with.
Especially with a first-year defensive coordinator.
Yeah. And they wouldn't have been wrong doing it if there was A&M next weekend. I just would have had a bit more angst because I'd say, hey, you want every bit of practice you can. But, yeah, it makes a ton of sense. I think your point is excellent, Trevor, because if you look at Al Golden the last 2 years, he did great shutting down Navy the last 2 years. Year one, good first half, but then Navy made some adjustments, and he had no ability to counter.
Yeah.
It's just the first time you've played the option in a long time, it can be a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
It can definitely be a struggle.
From PK, can you review the Leonard Moore versus Mekhi Lemon matchup? Went in the USC game. How many times did they go one-on-one? Did this performance enhance Moore's NFL draft stock?
I didn't count how many times they went one-on-one. I could tell you what and I'll look that up here real quick, PK. I could tell you how many times Leonard Moore lined up in the slot, and that'll give you a decent idea of how often, he was matched up against Malachi. So just give me a second on that. Leonard Moore was in the slot 41 snaps. He was a corner for 36 snaps. Not all those were against Mekhi. There was a couple times they went corners over, and it wasn't Mekhi he was up against. But that's a decent amount of those. A large chunk of those were against Mekhi Lemon. So how did he do against him? He did great, and he gave up the one slant route for a 27-yard game, which was a good play by Mekhi, and Leonard kind of just didn't have a great transition out of it. But other than that, he was all over Mekhi Lemon, just really clean with his releases, was patient. He wasn't overextending himself to press and get hands-on. He was physical with Mekhi. He can run with – that's the thing about Leonard Moore is he can run with Mekhi Lemon. Like, he's not like most tall guys. He's fast, and he's smart. So they ran that screen pass, and it was actually set up pretty well, but linemen aren't going to block Leonard Moore in that situation. But do I think he enhance his NFL draft stock? I would assume so. I'm not an NFL draft expert, PK, but I'm a football coach. And if I'm a football coach evaluating a guy like Leonard Moore, I'm like, listen, I can literally now play this guy anywhere I need to play him. I can mirror top receivers. Look how well he played in the slot. Now, am I going to make him a nickel? No. But if I draft him and I've got 2 veterans that can play outside and I've got another team's got a really good slot that I can't defend, would I consider maybe having him there? I can now. I can dream about it now. So I certainly think it helped his draft stock. I mean, first of all, you're going against one of the better receivers in college football and you shut him down. Secondly, it just showed his versatility. And there's things he had to do in that game athletically that he just doesn't have to do a lot playing in the boundary. And so I think he got to show off a lot more of that part of his game. Absolutely. So I think that part of it, PK, was very, very impactful for his present and future.
Yeah, real quick on the Mekhi Lemon Leonard Moore thing too, before we get to the next question. Watching him from an NFL perspective, he reminds me a heck of a lot of Pat Surtain, who plays for the Broncos right now. And Pat Surtain is one of the best cover corners in the league. Very similar body types, very similar skill sets, very good in man, shadows other teams' best receivers. I went back and I looked at Pat Surtain in his first couple of years with Alabama. It's very similar in a lot of good ways. Like both aggressive, both physical tacklers as well, not just a tall, lanky corner with a lot of speed. So, yeah, I think his draft stock has been raised.
And also, Leonard Moore gave up 2 catches for 28 yards against Mekhi Lemon, according to PFF, on 3 targets. He was only targeted 3 times. That means, let's say they were matched up 35 times. That means he was only targeted less than 10% of the time, which is a very low number for Mekhi Lemon. Because the reality is he just wasn't open.
Down and out, but statistically average podcast. Why do you think we are not seeing Cam Williams? Even if it were some sort of specialized play for him, like an end around, etc., could he be a secret weapon?
I think he could be if you're willing to do it. Unfortunately, look, love Mike Denbrock as an offensive coordinator. The one knock I've had on him consistently in his tenure is he is not willing to take a guy that doesn't know the whole route tree and play him unless he has to. I mean, I just unfortunately, that's kind of been a thing. And I understand it as a play caller, you somewhat limit yourself, but I just feel like when you got a kid like that, you play him 10 snaps a game, you teach him 3 things, and when he's in the game, you give him the option to run those things. But he should be able to do more than that. Sometimes as a receivers coach, like, look, my second year as a coach, we moved a kid to fullback who was a really good athletic linebacker, and we were a team that ran 2 backs. And the head coach, Mike Donnelly, said, he's like, your job is to get that kid ready to play. And so I had my starter, I had my backups, I had my tailbacks, but I had to spend extra time with that kid during the week of practice to make sure we got him ready to play. And that's absolutely something that Mike Brown should be doing with Cam Williams. I don't think that he is, from what I've been told, but he absolutely should. So, and then the other part is they're just not playing a rotation at all. I mean, KK Smith goes out there and has 3 catches against NC State, looks great, and then he doesn't play a single snap a week later against USC. So it's not just Cam. It's not just Cam.
Yeah, I've been talking about this for weeks. Something has to be done with the receiver rotation. You're not going to convince me that Cam Williams can't contribute to your offense in some way, shape, or form. He's 6'2", 200 pounds, and can fly. You can find him a role somewhere that's not blocking on kick return. So, yeah, I'm with you there.
Yep.
Tommy Guns, which Boston College defender do you expect to get targeted the most by the Notre Dame offense? I'll probably say Isaiah Ferris. I think some of that is just going to be naturally how Notre Dame runs their plays. I mean, Jordan Faison gets the lion's share of targets in this offense. Like we said before earlier in the show, Jordan Faison leads Notre Dame in targets. You said 40. Jordan Faison has 45 targets on the season, I think was the number you said earlier. And then you go and you look at Isaiah Ferris at corner, and so far he's been targeted 25 times. He's given up 225 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, doesn't have any interceptions. He's 5'11", $174. I think just naturally in the flow of Notre Dame's offense, Jordan Faison is going to get the lion's share of targets. So I think Isaiah Ferris could, but ideally I would like to see Mike Denbrock this game move like what we talked about before, Malachi Fields around in the offense. I could see it being, Omar Thornton or one of the safeties getting targeted against Eli Raridan quite a bit. But yeah, I would probably bet Isaiah Ferris.
I'm going to go. So the way that PFF does those numbers, Trev, I agree with you. I think that'll be the case if in that situation. I'm actually going to go Carter Davis, though, because the way that I count targets is if you're a cover 3 corner and they throw a hitch route, you're not the target. The flat defender is. But he'll get the – like there's times where PFF will say Christian Gray gave up a 9-yard reception or a 7-yard reception. He was the target. I'm like, dude, they're playing cover 3. He's not the flat defender. The hitch is in the flats. Like that's not on Christian Gray. That's on either a no cover throw or that's on the flat defender not getting out there. So if you're going to do it the way that I evaluate who the target is, I actually think it's going to be Carter Davis. I just feel like this is a game where Notre Dame knows they've got to get Malachi Fields going, and that's a matchup that you should be able to take advantage of. So that's why I'm going to go with Malachi. That doesn't mean Jordan Faison won't get the most targets from the offense. But I just think in certain looks, he's not going to be covering Jordan Faison. He won't be the guy responsible for it, even though on PFF he'll look responsible for it. But in all practicality, if you're saying your corner got targeted on a hitch route or a quick out in cover 3, then I don't think you understand how coverages work.
Sure. Nathan Williams, is this a way to knock on Notre Dame, or is the Notre Dame job not thought of as an elite of the elite job? I think
this goes back to Nathan's questions about why he keeps being asked. And we did kind of get on this. I don't think it's a knock on Notre Dame, intentional knock on Notre Dame. I do think a lot of people are still living in an old universe where Notre Dame doesn't have great facilities. That was true of Notre Dame not that long ago. They didn't have the facilities to hang with the teams down south or Ohio State. They didn't have, the support on campus. They didn't have this. They didn't have that. They didn't spend the money on coaches. All those things used to be true. They're not true anymore. But there's too many people living on, this old narrative. Perfect example. I don't know if it's real or not, but there's this tweet going around that's got a screenshot of Josh Pate's comments after Brian Kelly left for LSU. And at the end of it, he's like, wait till you see what happens to Notre Dame now that he's gone. Because the thought process, the lie that people like Josh bought into up until a week ago was that Brian Kelly got the most out of Notre Dame that you can get out of Notre Dame. What I kept saying for years was, no, he isn't. Not even close. And then you look at what Notre Dame is doing now, and that goes into a lot of their analysis. Like last year when Josh Pate said he thought LSU had a higher ceiling than Notre Dame. Remember we talked about that during the season, Trevor? I'm like, that's one of the most absurd things I've ever heard. And I like Josh, but he just has a lot of – he just believes things to be true that I just don't think are true because they're more narrative-driven than reality-driven when it comes to Notre Dame. And I think a lot of it's that. It's not laziness because Josh is a national person. He can't cover every team – though he can't cover Notre Dame and know about Notre Dame the way that the things that I know about Notre Dame. And I know he talks to people that cover Notre Dame. I just don't think it's the right people, and that would be my knock. But there is still this perception that Notre Dame is not an elite job. And I think anyone that does their homework for 10 minutes knows that that's absolute hogwash.
Yeah. Josh Pate actually put out a tweet on this like right before we got started on the show. Okay. And said that he's going to discuss his comment, but I have it. It says, we discussed this name on the board about Brian Kelly. We discussed this name on this very board several weeks back, and I told you he'd be my ideal candidate, but I never believed it was possible. Apparently, it was possible. If Woodward closes this, it's beyond a grand slam. I've listened to the doubters and have yet to hear a logical reason why LSU folks shouldn't be over the moon excited about this. Brian Kelly has essentially been trying to compete in the Daytona 500 with a Prius, given the limitations at Notre Dame relative to the college football's Tier 1. To even have them consistently in college football playoff conversation has been incredible. If you want to know how incredible it was, keep an eye on the program once he leaves. End quote.
Yeah, basically saying like they're going to go down the crapper. They're going to go back to the Charlie Weiss, Ty Willingham, Bob Davie days now that Brian Kelly's gone. That's what he's referring to there. Yeah. And obviously that's just been proven to be just not accurate. Now, have they shined way past what Brian Kelly did? No, they haven't. They've had one great year. They've got to finish this year strong. And then you can say that. Like right now, they're trending to be way past what Brian Kelly did. But if you go get upset by BC, Navy, Pitt, something like that, and, okay, maybe not so much, but they've certainly recruited better than what we saw during the Brian Kelly era. You can't talk about Notre Dame like there's not the resources that so there's still a lot of people living in this like it's 2005 again or 2008 again, where Notre Dame's playing on a grass field with grass this high, against USC. Well, you know why they're not going to do that now? You know why? If Notre Dame was playing USC right now, and that they would not have the grass high because, no, we're fast, and we don't want to slow ourselves down. So it's a different world, and some people just refuse to get up and believe that maybe their impressions of Notre Dame might be wrong. I don't know what else they need to do, to prove that, but that's just the reality of it. That's why I said in the show the other night, Trev, this is vindication for me. And my buddy texted me earlier, we were on the phone earlier, and he was like, you're going to take a bit of a victory lap the last couple of days, because I'm going on these different shows and talking about it. And I'm like, I said, yeah, that's true. And I enjoy that. But this is vindication for Notre Dame more so than Brian Driscoll, because my beef with Brian Kelly came from a conviction that Notre Dame is better than what Brian Kelly thought it was. And the success they've had since then is vindication of that, because Marcus Freeman believed that Notre Dame was better than Brian Kelly thought it was.
Yeah.
And so he doesn't accept 10-3. Hey, we went 10-3, but we had some big wins and blah, 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 blah. And we set this record, and it's a good year. No, he was, you watch him at the end of that 10-3 year in 2023, and he was pissed. I mean, in the bowl game against Oregon State, you're like, dude, you're still pissed about the Clemson game? Like the way he's acting on the sidelines, and you're like, this guy's still pissed about the Clemson game. And that's that's why he wins, because 10-3 is not good enough for him. 14-2 and beating Ohio State. And I've talked to so many sources, like he was cranky as heck for 2 months after the title game, not relishing in the title run. Brian Kelly would have been throwing himself a parade if he'd have gone to the championship game, because look at the phenomenal job I did. That's the difference, because one guy knows Notre Dame is capable of being here. The other guy says, no, they're not. I am capable of reaching the maximum, and whatever we're achieving, that must be the best we can do, because I can't possibly have done something wrong. And it's vindication for Notre Dame more than anything else. It's vindication that this program is that program. You just need the right guy in charge, and Marcus Freeman is that guy. So far has proven to be that guy. Still work to be done.
Patrick Duffy, if Notre Dame is up big versus Boston College at half, do you think Kenny Minchey gets significant time in the second half?
I would play him. I would give Ken, if Notre Dame's, let's just say Notre Dame's up on BC in a similar margin to what it was against Arkansas. So let's say it's one less touchdown. So let's say it's 35-7, similar margin. Not giving up as many points. I don't want to give up 13 first half points against Boston College. Let's say it's 35-7. I might give CJ the first drive of the third quarter, maybe, but I would not at all be opposed to giving Kenny a couple drives in the second half with the first team offensive line and at least one drive with the first team receivers. You never know. Not that, what if CJ played? No, it's what if CJ gets hurt? You don't want the first snap that Kenny Minchey took, to be in the semifinals. You want it to be, I got some against this team. I played some against this team. I also think if you're a coach that cares about your players, and I know Marcus Freeman and Mike Denbrock do, it also wouldn't be terrible to get Kenny Minchey some film against, first team defenses, at least in a couple games. But you're also protecting yourself against CJ Carr getting hurt. Now, if CJ only threw 7 passes in the first half, then I'd be like, look, we need to go out in this third quarter and let CJ throw some balls and get into a rhythm and all that kind of stuff. So there's always context of, okay, I still do want to see a little bit. Let's say CJ doesn't play well in the first half and they just ran all over BC. I'd want to get CJ going before I pulled him.
Yeah, we saw that last year against Virginia. They kept Riley in the game through most of the third quarter, despite at one point being up 35-0, 28-0. Just to get him in a rhythm and work the throwing offense a little bit. So I agree with you.
Yep.
Down and out, but statistically average podcast. How do you think our balanced and dynamic offense would fare against Ohio State's dominant defense? I think about this often.
I don't a ton because I'm still worried about beating the teams in front of them. But right now, I think Ohio State on defense is pretty much a finished product. Notre Dame's offense is not. If they were to go together right now, I would be a little concerned about Notre Dame being able to move the ball consistently against them. But I don't think Notre Dame's a finished product right now. Let's get Billy Schrauth back. Let's get Jaden Greathouse into the mix finally. Let's get CJ some more experience. So I'll feel a lot better about their chances of going against that defense by the time we get to the postseason than I am going into game 8. Where Ohio State right now is like they're cooking on defense. I mean, now they haven't played a lot of good offenses yet, but they're doing what an elite defense is supposed to do against a bunch of teams that aren't good offenses. You can't control your schedule. And I get all these people, like all these ESPN people, because it's basically the SEC network now. Ohio State, doesn't belong to be number one because who have they beaten? And I'm like, that's such a tired argument. You can't control your schedule. What you can control is who you beat and how you beat them. Well, yeah, A&M's played a tougher schedule. A&M also barely beat Auburn. Ohio State has not played anybody good, but they're dominating the teams that they're playing. I think the reason I think this matchup is so intriguing is because I feel the same way about Ohio State's offense that I feel about Notre Dame's offense. I think Ohio State's offense has room to get better as well. I just don't know that Ohio State's offense has the ceiling of Notre Dame's offense this year because I don't love their offensive line and I don't love their run game like I did last year. Their quarterback's a very talented young player and their receivers are elite. But I just feel like Notre Dame matches up really well against this Ohio State team once they peak. Right now, so be a little tough.
I'll be honest. If they played today, I think Ohio State's defense would win that matchup for a couple of different reasons. One, I don't think Notre Dame's offense is peaked. And two, they're not healthy yet. You don't have Billy Schrauth in the lineup. Charles Jagasaw could play a role at some point. Joe Otting is going into a second career start. Jaden Greathouse is still questionable. Cooper Flanagan is still working his way back from an Achilles injury.
Rubio's out on defense.
Exactly. So in this matchup specifically against Notre Dame's offense and Ohio State's defense today, I like Ohio State in that matchup, just being objective.
It'd be a close game.
Yeah.
It'd be a 27-24 type of game for whoever wins, And I'm looking at this from a neutral field standpoint, Trev. I assume you are too.
Yeah.
If it was at Notre Dame, I would pick Notre Dame to win. But I think Ohio State's closer to their ceiling right now than Notre Dame is as a team.
Yeah. From Juan Delgado, at this point in the season, how confident are you with the 2025 team to make a run in the postseason versus the 2024 team?
I'm very confident they're capable of it. Extremely confident. We were talking, I don't know if this was during the show live or if this was before when we were pre-gaming, but I said the 4 best teams in college football right now, just take resumes out of the conversation. Just with my eyes, watching film, who is the best teams? The 4 best teams in college football this year, in my opinion, in order, are Indiana, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Alabama. Right now. Right now, those are the 4 best teams in college football. Resumes aside. Now, would I rank Notre Dame 3rd in my playoff rankings? No, because the resume has to be part of that. And I hated it when people would want to bump up SEC teams because they're talented or but then if they're so good, why they lose to this team, right? You have to count the resume as part of the conversation. But I absolutely believe that Notre Dame is in the top 4 right now as far as how they're playing, even with still needing to get better here, still need to get better. Not what they can be, but just right now. So I'm confident this team is capable of it, but I also think this team is not as consistent as last year's team because their defense is still a little bit of a question mark from a consistency standpoint. But, and then obviously they're with the young quarterback and what he's kind of going through. But I think this team I actually have more faith that if this team plays their game, they're going to go on a deep run even than I did last year's team. I just was more confident that last year's team was going to play away to win those games.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense, Trev, but
Yeah, I get what you're saying. At this point in the season, I'm confident that they have all the potential in the world to. There's just some things that, and it's not that it's not a show me thing. It's literally Billy Schrauth is out. It's what I just talked about. Billy Schrauth is out. Jaden Greathouse is out. Like, you just lost Ashton Craig for the season. I mean, at this point, like, are they absolutely capable? Sure. A lot of football left to be played. A lot of football left to be played. So I need to see how they come out of the bye week against Boston College. CJ Carr starts to play more at a consistent level. The run game keeps doing its thing. The pass game takes another step in the right direction. Yeah. But they have all the potential in the world to reach that ceiling. It's just right now, there's just a lot of missing factors in that it's a lot of, if Billy Schrauth makes it back by the playoffs, and if he's 100% healthy, and if the MCL tear didn't bother him, and if this, and so, but yeah, I mean, I'm confident that I'll say this: if they make the playoffs, when they make the playoffs, I think that they can go on a run. We talked about that yesterday.
If they make the playoffs, I think there's going to be a lot of people kind of hoping that they're not in their side of the bracket.
Absolutely.
Here's kind of another question from Ghost X that's similar along these lines, Trev, comparing these two teams.
With the success Notre Dame is having stopping the run, is this team better equipped for the postseason with the 2025 Ash defense compared to 2024 Golden, assuming they continue to progress?
No.
I'm in the
At
same
the end
boat.
of the day, guys,
I'm just saying I'm in the same boat as you are. I'm interested to hear your.
I love the improved run defense, and it's not like if I wanted to get petty and like take shots at Chris Ash because I don't like Chris Ash or whatever, I'd be like, look, they're only good on run defense because teams are so good throwing on them, they don't have to run. That's not true. Arkansas tried to run on them and had some success with it. I mean, USC tried to run on Notre Dame, just couldn't do it. Boise tried to run on Notre Dame, couldn't do it. NC State tried to run on Notre Dame, couldn't do it. I mean, they are legitimately playing good run defense right now. But the playoff is still about it's not the same as not being. I mean, Notre Dame went on a run last year and didn't have a great run defense, but they could shut down your pass game. I think the key is still finding balance between the two. Last year's team was great against the pass, but they weren't good against the run, and that hurt them against Penn State in the first half, and it hurt them against Ohio State in the second and third quarters. This year's team is really good against the run, but I still have concerns about them defending the pass than I did. Like, I think they stack up a lot better. Like, if they were playing last year's Ohio State team, I'd say I don't think they're going to go on that 70-yard run, and I don't think but I would be concerned they would throw for a lot more yards than they did last year. So it all kind of balances itself out. I still think last year's defense was still, with Xavier Watts and Jack Kaiser, still had the veteran presence to where I knew what level I was going to get from them. And we knew that Al Gold knew how to use his personnel. We're still learning that about Chris Ash. So, no, I don't think as of today. Now, there's a follow-up question to that kind of these questions all build on each other, Trev, that I want to get to. But before I do, I wanted to get your thoughts on this answer as well.
Yeah, my answer is no, because not all playoffs are created equal. If Notre Dame had this run defense last year, and they went on a good run last year, but they allowed over 200 rushing yards to Penn State and over 200 rushing yards to Ohio State. Mm-hmm. I also think that last year's playoff had a better pool of running backs top to bottom. Agreed. I mean, I think a better rush defense would have went farther. And even if Notre Dame didn't have the same draw that they did, even if they played other teams, I mean, Boise State had Ashton Genty. Texas's run game was significantly more effective than what it was, this year. It was last year with Jadon Blue and Quintravion Wisner. They had a better offensive line. And then obviously we know about, what Ohio State and Penn State did on the ground. Well, look at the top teams this year. We just said that, 3 of the top 4 teams, not including Notre Dame, were Ohio State, Indiana, and Alabama. Well, what 3 things do those teams have in common? They don't really care if they establish the ground game. Alabama specifically. Like, there's not a
Alabama is zero. About establishing the run game. The only one that I'll push back on you on, Trev, is I do think this Indiana team cares about that. I do. They want to try to run the ball. They haven't always been able to. They couldn't run it against Oregon. They couldn't run it against Iowa, but they
let me rephrase how I put it with Indiana. I think Indiana last season, to be successful, needed to run the football because of how their offense was set up. And they couldn't against Ohio State, and they couldn't against Notre Dame in the playoffs. Whereas the difference this season is if you do shut down or limit Indiana's run game, I think they're still an effective offense. Yeah. Like, I think
Agreed.
Oregon did a relatively decent job of stopping Indiana's run game, and they still put up 30 points on the board because
Right, because
this
they're a
passing
more
offense.
balanced team this year. Right.
Yeah, I think
Right.
their passing offense has taken a step this season. So that's how
I
I
think
feel
the run
about.
game is also better this year too. I
Yeah,
think it's a better unit, and I think Cignetti's a smart guy and his offensive coordinator smart guy. We're not going to just run the ball just because we have this stubborn desire to run the ball. If you're dominating our run game, then we're going to find some other answers.
yeah,
And this unit's to your point, this team's more capable of that. But when you look at Indiana's rushing offense this year, I mean they were over 300 yards each of their first 4 games, and that included against the top 10 Illinois team. You know, they ran for 262 on UCLA this weekend. So I think they want to run the ball. They've just played some teams that have been able to stop them from running the ball. But they're also, you know, there's some teams that are just really bad at certain things, and they're not going to do it just to do it. And you know, Michigan State's a pretty bad pass offense. So why would he not try to go at that? You know, like, so there's not a stubbornness there, which is probably what makes them good. But to your point, Trev, if they're going to win it all, it's going to be because they're able to throw the football in those big moments. And if they don't win it all, it'll be because they can't throw the football in those big moments.
mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
that's what got Oregon back in that game. I mean, if they threw the ball better against Oregon, that game's a 2-3 touchdown game.
yep.
I mean, like, Mendoza had some big misses in that game of open players and some bad decisions, but I think your comment about this year's teams against last year's teams is absolutely spot on. You have to look at who are you going against.
Yeah.
You know, Georgia is the only team that I look at and like, that team has a dogged desire to run the football. If you can shut down their run game, they're toast against a good team.
Yeah,
You saw that against Bama.
Yeah, I was just about to say, like, them and Vandy. I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
are the 2 teams that are like live and die by running the football. And with Vandy, it's their quarterback. So
Yeah.
it just depends. I would put it this way, Ghost. I would feel a lot more confident if, you know, Notre Dame had last year's pass defense going into the playoffs, opposed to having this year's rush defense going into the playoffs. I understand why you asked the question, but just not all playoffs are created equal.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Here's the not a follow-up, but another question that kind of along those lines that I wanted to get to, Trev.
Yeah, Jonathan Reich. If Notre Dame makes another title run, i.e. gets to the national championship game or wins it all, do we have to change our tunes on Chris Ash?
I have no problem changing my tune on Chris Ash if the evidence warrants it. And we have been more praiseworthy of Chris Ash in recent games. But I don't know that my tune is going to change a ton, to be honest with you, because I still feel that the things that they're doing now, they're doing because he was kind of led down that path as opposed to him getting here and embracing it. And that's still a bit of a concern. You know, like, if you win, is he going to go back to doing it his way next year? You know, I'm not sure about that. Having said that, if they win it all, it's impossible to do that without Chris Ash calling good games for most of the stretch during that time. So will I be like, they won in spite of Chris Ash? The only way I'm going to do that is if they win a bunch of 49-42 games in the playoffs. But like, to my thing is, without any context, Jonathan, what if Notre Dame's offense just scores 45 a game in the playoffs like Ohio State did last year? They give up 24-30 every week. Are we going to be like, time to change your tune on Chris Ash? No. So I need to know some context of how the games go, but I have a hard time believing that they're going to go on a 4-game run without Chris Ash and his defensive staff doing a pretty good job. And in that regard, my tune will change in that he wasn't the disaster of a coach that he was in the first month of the season. But then I'll go back to and say, but I'm still frustrated because no matter what you do from here on out, you get evaluated on that, but it doesn't all of a sudden, like, this is what I get tired of. It doesn't change what we saw the first month of the season. And there was a very dramatic shift. Why did you need 2 losses and just a terrible performance against Purdue to be like, maybe we shouldn't do this anymore? You know what I mean? Like, that's frustration is still going to be there. But it doesn't mean that I'm then going to fail to give him credit for the things that he has done to then get them to that finish line. So what frustrates me is when people are like, you owe Chris Ash an apology. Why? I would owe him an apology as if the success they're having now was due to him running the same defense they were running earlier in the year. They're just getting better at it. Like, then I would say, you know what, man, my bad. I just needed to have more patience. But that's not what's happening. There was a dramatic shift after Arkansas in what they were doing schematically. And that's been the driver of the recent success. And I give him credit for that. I give him credit for being willing to make the adjustments and then lean into those adjustments. Right? I mean, you give him credit for that. Absolutely. And you won't see me poo-poo and I hope this guy gets fired even though they just won a title. Like, well, that sounds personal to me. You know what I mean? But you just hope that he understands that this is the new normal. But I'll still be annoyed and pissed when I look back at how the first month of the season went, because there was just no need for that. That's what I'm saying, Trev. Like, you can walk and chew gum at the same time, man. You can say, hey, right now, doing a great job. But, like, nothing annoys me more when the homers jump on. You're like, you just needed to be patient with Chris Ash, and they knew what they were doing. No, they didn't, because this isn't what they were doing. They changed, and they deserve respect for changing. But don't try to gaslight me and act like they're doing the same stuff now. They're just better at it, and they know more of it. Don't lie to me. Don't gaslight me. You know, like, you did change. Be honest about it, and then we can praise you for having the courage and the lack of ego, unhealthy ego, to make that change. You deserve praise for that. But when you start to gaslight me, like at the press conference last week, well, we're not really doing anything different. We're just better at it. See, now you're just pissing me off. You're also confirming to me that what we all know to be true is true, that this wasn't you driving this bus to make the changes. You're trying to gaslight us. A coach he would have been like, look, you know what? First 3 games, I was really getting to know the players, and I had an idea of what we wanted to do. And as I got to know the players more, I realized, like, we kind of needed to make some adjustments and maybe do more of this and do more of that. And I think that gave us a better chance to really play to our strengths as a team. And we're really rolling now. That's what he should have said. Instead of, no, we're doing the same stuff. We haven't changed anything. We're just better at it now. That's a guy protecting himself. Well, what are you protecting yourself from? Well, because you don't want people to realize that you're not the one driving this bus to make these adjustments. That's what frustrated me, Trev. But at the same time, he's still calling plays. Anyone saying, oh, Marcus Freeman's calling plays? No, he's not. I mean, you guys will see during the defenses being called and Marcus Freeman's, they're yelling at officials. So who's calling the plays if Marcus Freeman's yelling at officials? It's clearly Chris Ash. He's also not getting the calls from someone up top. And then, this is Chris Ash. He deserves credit for this. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to pretend like the first month didn't happen. And I'm not going to pretend like he would have done this on his own, because he didn't.
No, I think all that's fair. I'll say this, I agree with where you're coming from. If Notre Dame wins a national championship, I'm not going to be as upset because of what happened against Purdue. I'm just not. Like, I would be lying if I said that I was. Like, I wasn't after Northern Illinois last year when Notre Dame won the Orange Bowl. Like, after they won the Orange Bowl, I didn't go back and look and say, how did they lose to Northern Illinois? Like, that wasn't me.
That's not what I'm saying, though. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying I'm going to not enjoy the championship because I'm still pissed about that. What I am saying, however, is we're not going to change history and pretend like that was all part of the master plan. And if we're going to go talk about the beginning of the season, so like, let's say like a postseason recap of the year, and we're back to the first month, I'm not going to be like, you know what? Like, looking back, this was actually a good thing because of this, and this. No, when we talk about the first month of the season, I'm going to be pissed off. But what I'm not going to do is during the playoff run be talking about the first month of the season, because it's about who you are now, and it doesn't take away from it. I just want to make sure that I'm being understood here correctly. I'm not going to be less happy about the championship because of the first month, but I'm also not going to be gaslit and act like the first month was all part of this master plan to get the defense to play championship football. That's what I'm saying.
No,
I'm not going to give him credit for this master plan because I don't think it was on him, but it's not going to at all take away. Like, I want to beat Ohio State on my way to a championship. I think that would add more to it. Am I going to be less satisfied if they don't have to play Ohio State on the way to the championship? No. It's just I'm a believer if I want to beat the best, and Ohio State is the best. But I'm going to still be pretty freaking happy if they win a championship without beating Ohio State. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
They'll either beat the team that beat Ohio State or beat the team that beat the team that Ohio State. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just, I'm still going to love it. But if it happened that way, I think it'd be even sweeter. You get what I'm saying, Trev? So I don't want it to come across like I'm not going to be as happy about a championship if because Chris Ash did whatever in September. I just want to make sure that that's properly misunderstood or properly. No, I don't think it's properly understood. Not
no, I get where you're coming
properly
from.
Misunderstand me, Trevor.
No, I get where you're coming from now. It's just like initially that's how I took it. I was like, I don't know if I'm there, but but for me specifically, it'll feel a lot like how we talked about the Northern Illinois loss when we did an end of the season recap. You know, Notre Dame made a run. They played for the national championship game. Still don't understand what the first, what happened in the first 2 weeks of the season. That was a lot of my tune around, the 2024 season. But I'm with you. I also don't. I was the one that transcribed Chris Ash's interview when I had to listen to it. And I was sitting there and I was transcribing. I was like, "All right, guy. Like, it's the same but better." Okay.
Yeah.
But
you see what I'm saying? They're like, don't gaslight me, dude. Just be honest about. Look, we were trying to do some things, and I was learning the players. They were starting to learn me. We're doing a lot better job. We really wanted to be a more balanced team between man and zone. And get different looks, and we weren't great at that. We've gotten better at those things, but you know what? We needed to be a more aggressive team. And as I got to know these players well and their strengths more, we started to lean into certain things, and that is a good answer without saying I effed up the first 3 games and Marcus Freeman ripped me a new one and I was forced to change. But when you just sit there and lie right to our face, like it's the same stuff you've been doing. Well, I guess that's kind of true because of what I've said in my intel, which is like the stuff was in there. He just never called it, but that's still doing something different. You weren't calling it. You weren't using it. So I just dislike when people gaslight us. It's like, how stupid do you think we all are? Like, seriously, I get so tired of coaches that think media people, like you see these little snide comments like, well, they're just podcasters, like, well, this podcaster has a national championship ring. Has coached All-Americans. You know what I mean? Like, so don't gaslight me and be like, well, we're doing the same things. We're just better at it now. A lot of people in our chat have played football, have coached football. Like they know football. Don't act like we're just these stupid rubes from idiocracy that just believe whatever you tell us. There are some people like that, but I know the Irish Breakdown audience isn't like that. Don't gaslight us. Just be honest. You don't have to be completely honest. Just say exactly what I said. I don't understand why that's so hard for some coaches. Just to be honest in a way that doesn't be like, yeah, well, I was, Marcus called me in and told me I needed to do this. I'm not saying you need to say that, but then just sit there and lie to us and then just be like, but the reason they do it is because there are people that will believe that. And that's what I love about the IB crowd is because most people in this crowd, they're like, come on, dude. Like, I'll give you credit for making changes, but let's not pretend like this was all part of your master plan. Give me a break. It's frustrating.
Oh, I get it. Like I said, when I transcribed it, I'm looking at the email right now. When I transcribed it, it was crazy. I get it.
All right, let's get back up here. Last couple here before we get out of here.
What are your thoughts on Love's Heisman chances? Sorry, from RWCG 331. What are your thoughts on Love's Heisman chances? Me, he's not getting enough attention.
Well, I don't think he deserved Heisman attention until the USC game. I don't know what you think about that, Trev, but he had some good games here and there, but he hadn't done anything that was Heisman worthy prior to that game. I mean, there were more games prior to USC where I would argue Jadarian Price was the better running back in those games than Jeremiah Love was.
Yeah.
Pure running back. So, yeah, and you need to do more than one great game to be there. I think he put himself on the map, but he's going to need a couple more big performances these next few weeks to be in that conversation.
Yeah, I think he's right where he needs to be. He still has the 8th best odds in FanDuel. He's still the highest ranked non-quarterback Heisman candidate in the race right now. I mean, look, I love Jeremiah Love as much as the next person. But the numbers he put up against USC is what Ashton Genty almost did on a weekly basis. Like, you have to put into frame of reference. Context always matters. what top level, like top 3 Heisman candidate running backs do in their Heisman run seasons and look at those numbers on a per week basis, that's just not what Jeremiah Love was doing. And that's not a knock on him. Sometimes it was dictated by, what the offense needed that day. Sometimes it was just lack of getting him the football. But, you go look at what Ashton Genty did in his Heisman season and on his run, and what Derrick Henry did when he won the Heisman in 2015, and what some other running backs did in conversation with some of those. It's Jeremiah Love still has a ways to go. Now he has 5 more games against subpar competition to do so and pad some of those numbers to be more in it. But Brian, I'm with you 100%. I think he's right where he needs to be, and his first Heisman-worthy opponent first Heisman-worthy performance was against USC. Now, if some of the special teams touchdowns that Jadarian Price had is also what, like, if those were Jeremiah Love's, then yeah, I think he should have been a little bit higher because he's making plays in the rushing attack, in the pass game, and on special teams. Then you're getting into then you're getting into like the Christian McCaffrey conversation of what he's doing for this football team. But no, I'm with you. Same page there. From Michael Nellis, who should Michigan State hire if Smith is fired?
I'd have to think more about that. I'd have to think more about some options there. I mean, honestly, they wouldn't be crazy to look at Brian Kelly. Part of me says Brian Kelly can win there, but I don't know that I'd ever wish on any group of players how they're going to be treated in order and on their path to get to that success.
Yeah.
But that's more his level. But maybe he has a come to Jesus moment, a literal come to Jesus moment, and he realizes, like, dude, I can't keep treating people this way. Like, these kids got to know I care about them, and they're not these stupid idiots that just, I can go make some funny, make some lame attempt at humor and stuff, and they're going to care about me because I'm just so smart and my great track record. Like, I got to really care about these kids and really do some things for these kids. And I think Michigan State might not be a bad spot for him. Outside of that, honestly, I'd have to put some thought into that, Michael. I think where they're smart is they need to not go get some other retread. They need to not go get some, group of 5 guy from, or power 5 guy from somewhere else that's making a lateral move on his way up somewhere. I'd say I'd want to look at, who's doing well in the state, who's doing well in the region. I mean, there'd be some FCS, some group of 5 coaches I'd want to look at. I'm making a call down to, part of me says, do you want to make a call to like an Alex Golesh or John Sumrall? Those would make me a little bit nervous, simply from the standpoint of I feel like they would view our job as more of like a stepping stone to something bigger and better, but like there's some good coaches out there, man. Do you look at the Memphis coach? Maybe, do you look at the North Texas coach and say, hey, we need to run sort of a gimmicky offense, allows us to throw the ball. I don't know if playing in Michigan makes it conducive in November to wanting to play that kind of offense. You know what I mean? You got to think about stuff like that. And so those are some different things that I think about, Trev, and say, you've got to be careful because you want to get somebody that can do the job at a high level, but you got to make sure you're not just going out and getting somebody that's just going to look at your program as a 2-year stepping stone to somewhere else. Because then even if that guy wins, you're back to square one.
You need to find you need to go out and find some blue collar head coach, nose to the grindstone type of guy for the Michigan State job, in my opinion. I think they've experimented with the, spread you out offense with Aiden Childs, who I do still think has a lot of potential. And hey, let's run a, West Coast style type of offense. Michigan State at its peak has been able to run the football and dominate the line of scrimmage. And that's something that they need a head coach that personifies that a little bit. I don't know if they're going to, I don't know where they're going to go find that, to Brian's point. Have to look into it a little bit more, but I think that needs to dictate the direction that Michigan State goes. I think you need to figure out what type of direction you want to go as a program before you go and just hire the next qualified head coach.
Right.
Because one of the fears on the opposite side, similar to what you're talking about with somebody making the step up and they don't view it as a stepping stone job, how would a Brian Kelly view taking a step back in his career at this? Now, I think that's kind of the direction that he kind of has to go, after the job that he did it. But how would he receive that?
I think his next job would be his last job. And then how would he be? But here's the thing. Is he just doing a little 3-4 year fix to retire on a good note? Or we say, you know what? I'm going to go spend the next 10 years here, retire here, and win a lot of football games.
Exactly.
I don't know. Like Bob Chesney's a guy whose name I would want to give a ring to. You know, he's a guy that I think could view Michigan State as a potential destination job. You want to, as best you can, try to find a darn good football coach who views this job as a destination job. That would be something I would be very interested. I mean, a guy that I would think that guy that I'd be very interested in is Chris Kleiman at Kansas State. Like, would he be interested in a job like that? Like, I know he had a great deal of success, you know, at North Dakota State. Obviously, his Kansas State track record's been a little bit up and down, but I do wonder, Trev, if he'd be a guy that could maybe do some things. He's another guy that's a little bit on the older side. I don't know that he would view this job as like, I think it'd be a bit of a destination job for him. He's a Midwestern guy. Just somebody like that is who I would maybe want to look more into. You know, Lance Leopold, guy's a darn good football coach. If Willie Fritz was still at Tulane, I'd be all over Willie Fritz, but I don't know that Michigan State's going to be like this giant jump up from Houston. It's a pretty good job. But somebody like that is more in line of what I'm looking for. Somebody that's going to view it as a destination job who can just flat out coach football. And what do all those coaches I just mentioned have in common? They all believe in what you talked about, Trev, which is we're going to run the football, we're going to be smart and sound, and we're going to play good defense. And that's Michigan State football. I mean, that's what you got to do with Michigan State, in my opinion. They may want to go a different way. Like I said, the part of the reason you have to be that way is, like I brought the North Texas guy. That may look great in September and October, but can you really play that at a high level in November and December that far north? Like, you know, you got to think about those things.
Tristan, 1776, of all the coaches that have not been fired, how has Hugh Freeze not been fired? Not advocating, just curious what Auburn's thought process is.
Money and a viable candidate.
Yeah. The other thing that I would add in here too, and I know it sounds a little bit weird talking about this with Auburn, but compared to LSU and compared to Penn State, I don't know how high, I know their fans do, but I don't know how high up on the food chain, like being a dominant football program is with them. I mean, they've had one double-digit win season since like 2014.
Oh, they think they should be great, though. That's the crazy thing. Like, they are a very delusional fan base.
I think, fan base, absolutely agreed.
And administration. Yeah, go ahead, Trev.
I think that's what's weird, though, is like the administration and the fans talk about we're Auburn and we should be this. It's like, well, you've had one double-digit win season since 2014, and your hires have not been conducive to your thought process. Right. Like with LSU, I understand it. I mean, they won a national championship in 2019. You know, and then before then, they were, pretty consistent powers in the SEC. With Penn State, I know they haven't won a national championship since 1986, but they were, for the most part, especially in recent history, atop of the Big Ten. Like, they were kind of little brother to Ohio State and Michigan, but in contention, they were always mentioned in the Big Three and the Big Ten. Auburn has not been in that conversation. So I think that they are a fan base and an administration that talks a big game, but their actions do not follow that up with,
like just the Brian Harsin hire, I still just don't understand. Like, why anyone thought that was going to – we talked about it at the time. Like, he's a Northwestern guy who's never coached anywhere close to the SEC. Like, they've made a lot of dumb decisions. And I almost kind of feel like, okay, Freeze, just for all his struggles, has a track record of success in this league.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what he can do. So I'd be very curious about that. Very curious about that. Here's an interesting game I just thought of. If I'm Michigan State, do you call Pat Narduzzi and see how happy he is at Pitt? I mean, he was your D coordinator for a long time.
Yeah, that's not
he's
bad.
A guy that had some success there. So, like, just people like that are more so what I would be interested in than, a retread like Brian Kelly. Although, again, I think Brian Kelly could have some success there if he was willing to eat a little bit of humble pie.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Last one, Trev, right here from J.C. Bodie.
How would you feel if Notre Dame has to play IU in Bloomington, and how would that game play out?
I have a feeling this is going to be a pretty consistent mailbag question because we got asked this last week as well. I think it'd be a very good game. I think it'd be a very competitive game. Who would win? I mean, I'd pick Notre Dame to win, but Indiana would be a tough out. There's no question. The longer Notre Dame plays like it has the last month, the more confident I would be that Notre Dame could win the football game. But I also would be concerned about it turning into another Texas A&M.
Yeah.
Where you're going to need to score 40-plus points to win the football game because your defense can't stop anybody. The more the defense keeps playing like it has, the more confident I'll get to be there to get there. But, again, I want to see a more healthy Notre Dame football team take on Indiana as well. That's going to be a big part for me, but because they're very good along the lines. And Notre Dame's lines right now are a little beat up.
Mm-hmm. The fascinating storyline coming out of these two games would be Notre Dame would be the best team that IU would have played, and IU would be the best team that Notre Dame would have played. And I think that's a really good conversation around, this matchup. I don't put too much emphasis on it being on the road. Like, I think IU is a quality stadium. Notre Dame has played in significantly tougher environments, in my opinion. But the game as a whole between two teams, I think it'd be great. I think it would be close, and I think it would look significantly closer than what last year's game did.
Notre Dame can beat any team in college football right now. But there are certain games that are just going to be a lot harder. Ohio State would be a lot harder. Indiana would be a lot harder. I'll say it again. I think the three best football teams in the country right now are on a map like this: Columbus, South Bend, Bloomington. I really do. And you know me, Trevor. I'm not a northern bias guy because I like hammering the Big Ten, but I also watch a ton of football, and I'm not an idiot, and I'm not biased. And when you watch these teams play over the last month, I think these have been the three most impressive teams. Bama's had some impressive weeks, but then they have weeks where you're just like, dude, that's a flawed football team. And they're going to get jumped on at some point in time. So, and South Carolina almost did it. If they weren't an even more flawed football team, so, and anyone saying Alabama's better than IU, you're still living in the past. They are not a better football team than Indiana right now. There's too many people, Trevor, that still refuse to accept the fact that this is a really talented and really well-coached A&M or Indiana football team. Guys, this is not last year's team. All the best players from last year are back, and they've added some really good pieces. And they're now year two of the system. Like, some of you got to get over this notion that Indiana is not legit. They are. They are legit. Now, are they this unbeatable force? No, they're not. The Big Ten's not very good after the first three teams. That's a fact. They're going to blow out a lot of bad teams. But that doesn't mean that they're not really good, because they are really good. And they are definitely, in my opinion, a better team than Alabama. Now, can Alabama beat them on a neutral field? Of course. Because there is no unbeatable team this year. There is no 19 LSU or 2020 Bama. There's a lot of teams that can beat Indiana. A lot meaning like 5 or 6 or 7. Yeah. But there's also Indiana can beat anyone right now also on any given Saturday. This isn't last year where they were clearly below Notre Dame and Ohio State. Clearly below those two teams. They're not this year. And a big part is they had a MAC quarterback last year. They have a legit good player at quarterback. Now, I think he gets a little bit too much hype, honestly, but he's a legit quarterback. Their defense is real. This is what people aren't talking enough about because they score so many points. That's one of the best receiving corps in college football, one of the best O-lines in college football. But what makes this Indiana team dangerous, that's one of the 5 best defenses in college football right now. Bryant Haynes is doing a phenomenal job with that defense. That's what makes them dangerous. It goes back to what you were saying earlier, Trev. They can beat teams running the football, they can beat teams throwing the football, and they can win a defensive battle. And that's what makes them dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I would contend that, and this is also working on the premise that I also do think that IU is a better football team. Like, I think they're a better complete team than Alabama is. I would contend that they don't have the top-end talent that
Sure.
Alabama does at certain spots, but that doesn't make you the better team. I mean, Auburn has Cam Coleman, and look what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, so like just having top end talent doesn't mean that you're the better team. Notre Dame
Does
had better
Alabama
talent. Yeah, Notre Dame had better talent than Miami and Texas A&M from top to bottom. I'll
Yep.
die on that hill.
Agree?
They didn't win.
Agree. I'll die on that with you.
Yeah.
I would say that, for example, offensive line is a great example. Are there future higher rate pick? Are there players that would be picked in the future higher in the draft at Alabama on the O-line than Indiana? Absolutely. There are higher draft picks on Alabama's starting offensive line. Is Alabama's offensive line as good as Indiana's? No way. No way. Does Alabama have a wide receiver that would be drafted higher than anybody Indiana has? Absolutely. If I could right now take either of those two receiving corps, I'm taking Indiana's because they make more plays. Ryan Williams is an elite talent. He doesn't make as many plays. He's still young.
Consistent.
Right? He's still, and he'll get there. He's going to be special. To your point, Trev, he's very inconsistent. And Jeremy Menard's a veteran player that's smart, but he's not an elite talent. Right now, Omar Cooper, Garrett Surratt, those are legit dudes. So I think and their defense is legit this year. I mean, they've got NFL players on their defense. They got NFL players on all three levels of their defense at Indiana. And that's what people I think that's where people are missing the boat. There's still a lot of people that I think, well, they're just a great coach team. And this guy's taking a bunch of okay players and turning them into a great team. Guys, no. There's some truth to that. There's some guys playing above their kind of punching above their weight class, so to speak, because of how well coached they are and they're veterans. But there's legit NFL talent on this football team.
Yeah.
That people aren't giving much credit for. And I think that Indiana doesn't get enough credit because I'll just be honest, Trev, you and I've said it. The Big Ten, after the top three teams, there's a couple good teams there. Iowa, Indiana, Iowa, Michigan, USC are quality teams. And then a bunch of hot mess after that. The Big Ten is not good this year outside the top three teams, but that doesn't take away from how good the top. I think there's two teams at the top, a third team that's pretty good. But I would argue that Oregon's closer to USC and Iowa right now than they are Ohio State and Indiana. Now, I could be proven to be wrong over the next month, and we're going to find that out because they've got to play USC. They've got to play Iowa. But I've been blown away with Oregon this year. I don't think Indiana even played very well and still went out in Oregon and beat them. Like, everybody acts like, oh, they threw a pick six. Their pass game was sloppy. They didn't even play very well and still beat Oregon by 10 on the road. I think I don't think Oregon gets to 14 points against Ohio State this year right now. I think Ohio State would just completely dominate that Oregon offense. So I think there's two teams clearly above everybody else in the Big Ten. The SEC doesn't have anybody as good as Ohio State and Indiana, in my opinion. But their 3 through 9 is way better than 3 through 9 in the Big Ten. So I think that hurts Indiana's perception that they're blowing out teams that nobody respects. But I'm like, guys, pop on the film. And you're going to see that legit good football team. Because they're not just beating these teams, they're obliterating these teams. And I would argue Cignetti in his last couple games has actually taken a little bit more easy on teams than he did last year. Like UCLA, not UCLA, but Michigan State, I thought he kind of caught off the dogs a little bit in that game, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Which he would have done last year.
Yeah, weather in the Michigan State game definitely helped play a factor in that, I will say. Like there was a delay and yeah, so I think a lot of that, but doesn't take away from how good Indiana's looked. I'm in full agreement with you. The thing that's been hard about, and this is the last thing I'll say, the hardest part about the Big Ten is like you can make the argument Penn State is like single-handedly kind of ruined both Ohio State and Indiana's resume to a degree. Think about it this way. Oregon's win over Penn State looks significantly less good, with Penn State being who they are now, still doesn't have a Power 4 win. Ohio State, this weekend, we talked about it at the start of the week. Like, who would have thought that this game would have just literally not have mattered for Ohio State? And then IU also has to go play Penn State. So Penn State has single-handedly kind of ruined the outlook of the top three teams in the Big Ten in Ohio State, IU, and Oregon. Now, that doesn't take away from IU's win against Oregon. I still think that was a fantastic win. I said it at the time. It's the best win in their program's history, and I don't know if it's overly close.
Easily.
But that's what's so tough about the Big Ten is because then IU and Ohio State don't play each other this year. Oregon and Ohio State don't play each other this year. Everybody was kind of banking on Penn State being that one team that they were like, hey, they'll be ranked high and we will beat that team. And unfortunately, they're poo. So
it's an insult to poo.
Well, yeah. Yeah. Poo likely would have had a Power 4 win by now at some point.
Oh, man. Wow.
And Penn State's not going to have a Power 4 win at least until November 15th.
Man. Whew.
Tough look. Thanksgiving might come around before Penn
Did you
State
say they won't have – what'd you just say about Penn State? They won't what?
Have a Power 4 win until at least November 15th. I mean, their next 2 games are against Ohio State and IU.
Wow.
And then they play Wisconsin, who just played Oregon down to 21-7.
You know what's funny? They are so terrible, Wisconsin, but they're just that weird team. They just seem to know how to mess with Oregon.
I know.
It's weird.
Did it back-to-back years, man. Weird.
Yeah, weird but they're awful. But yeah, I this next month is going to be very telling for the Big Ten because they're going to go. They could go from a 3-team league to a 4-team league, maybe even 5, depending on how the next month goes.
Yeah,
I think most likely they're a 3-team league, maybe 4, because in order to get a 4th, some teams to jump into the mix are going to require them to knock Oregon out. You know what I mean? Like USC and Iowa have to play them. They're in the mix. There's a scenario in which I could see one of USC. I think to get to 4 teams, you need a couple things to happen. Number one is you need Michigan to run the table. That includes beating Ohio State. If Michigan's 10-2 at the end of the year with a win over Ohio State, they're in my opinion. Now, I don't know if they're hosting, but they're in. And then the other thing, too, is, and obviously Oregon wins out, they're fine. I think that's the way to get 4 teams in. The other way is like USC goes on a run because they'd have some really good wins. They'd beat Nebraska. They'd beat Oregon. Iowa's a team that could potentially get there, because they have some tough games left as well. They have to play Oregon. They have to play at USC. They have to play at Nebraska. So there's some paths to 4 teams, but I just think there's going to be a lot of beating each other up, and I just don't see Michigan beating Ohio State. And I know, and I said it last year, I get all that. It's all 100% true. It's just, I just don't see it, man. I think this is a little bit of a different Ohio State team. But I got to see it. I got to see it, but I just don't see it. I don't see how they're going to win this game. I think last year was a fluke. 2 years before, Michigan, you could argue, was the better team. So we'll see. We'll see. I'd say defense travels, but their defense wasn't the reason they lost that game last year. They gave up 13 points, and their only touchdown came on a pick that Michigan ran back inside the 5. And
it took them like 4 downs to score.
Was there a penalty mixed in there too, or something like that? It was crazy, man.
It was not. It was like a 7-play 4-yard drive.
It was insane. I'm actually going to look that up before we leave, Trev, because that was wild. Let's go. Ohio State and Michigan box score 2024. I want to look that up because that was a hilarious drive. It was a Michigan scoring drives. They had ended up being okay. It was two plays, 2 yards. They had back-to-back series. This is Michigan scoring drives in their win over Ohio State last year. 2 plays, 2 yards. 4 plays, 3 yards. So they got 10 points on 5 yards on 6 plays. Got them two scores.
Woof.
Their long drive of the game was an 11-play, 57-yard field goal drive at the end of the game. Like, here were their drives: 6 for 25. They did 11 for 72 turnover and downs, 2 for 2 touchdown, 3 for 5 punt, 4 for 3 field goal, 1 of 6, 3 for 4 punt, 3 for 3 interception, 15 for 77 interception, 11 for 57 field goal, and then end of game. Like, anything could happen. I mean, I think Michigan's better than they were last year, but that'd be tough. That'd be tough. Well, Trev, that'll do it, man. That's our final question for today.
Well, good deal. Well, folks, like Brian said, that'll do it for us here today on the Irish Breakdown podcast. Here in about an hour, the guys are going live to talk through some midseason awards for some Notre Dame football players sent out on IB Nation Sports Beat. So be sure to hop over and check them out. Brian and I will be back tomorrow, Wednesday, for our Keys to Victory show. You're going to want to make sure you tune in for that one. 1 p.m. We're going live. Make sure you tune in. On your way out of here, be sure to hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. Be sure to hit that notification bell so you know whenever we go live. Whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, we would also greatly appreciate a 5-star review. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So until tomorrow, that's Brian. I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.